Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The world of Harry Potter is a wondrous place, full of magic, enchantments, and an atmosphere that words can barely capture. But if we stop looking at it through the lens of childhood wonder and apply the cold logic of adulthood, one thing becomes clear. This universe is riddled with contradictions, questionable choices, and outright plot holes. One of the most controversial elements in this magical world is the Ministry of Magic. It seems to exist, it claims to maintain order. And yet where were these wizarding officials when the most absurd and dangerous things were happening? Let's investigate. Number 1. Love potions. A legalized form of assault. In the Muggle world, any attempt to control another person's will is seen as a crime. In the wizarding world, it's just a joke. Love potions are openly sold, toyed with by teenagers, and adults turn a blind eye. In Half-Blood Prince, we're shown two disturbing cases. Voldemort's mother uses a love potion to ensnare his father. Later, Ron falls victim to one himself. This isn't a prank, it's magical coercion. The fact that the Ministry of Magic hasn't enforced strict regulations on such potions is baffling and alarming. Number 2. Turning animals into objects, a lesson in cruelty. In the second year at Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall teaches students how to turn animals into cups. Yes, actual living creatures. And no one explains whether the animal feels pain or can die if the spell goes wrong. Some students manage only partial transformations, leaving, say, a cat's ears intact while the body turns into porcelain. Where is the ministry when children are taught this? Or is magical ethics just an optional extracurricular? Number 3. Potion brewing without supervision. How to survive in a world where anyone can make poison. Potions are incredibly powerful. They can heal, kill, manipulate, deceive, and even transform appearances. In the Muggle world, substances with such effects would be tightly regulated. But in the wizarding world? Brew whatever you want, wherever you want, even in a school bathroom. As the Polyjuice potion incident proves, a group of students can easily obtain rare ingredients and concoct a powerful, illegal brew in secret. Where's the oversight? Where are the permits? Why is this not regulated like apparition? Number 4. Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, a madhouse of unlicensed chaos. Fred and George Weasley are brilliant magical entrepreneurs, but their products, let's say they're not exactly safe. Love potions, earplugs that induce deafness, and even Peruvian instant darkness powder, which Draco Malfoy later used in his attack on Hogwarts. Funny, entertaining? Until someone gets hurt. Students fake illnesses en masse using Weasley products, overwhelming the hospital wing, and no one even considers licensing their items. Ministry of Magic? Apparently just big fans of creativity. Number 5. A dark magic shop in plain sight with zero consequences. Borgin & Burke's is a shop that sells everything from cursed necklaces to blood-stained artifacts, and it operates legally for decades. The Ministry is fully aware but chooses not to interfere. Why? If a Muggle found out there was a legal arms dealer in central London, it would be a national scandal. But for wizards, just a specialty store. Apparently, nothing will change until a cursed object makes its way into a school and kills a student. Number 6. Owlpost, a spy's paradise. In the Muggle world, privacy is sacred. In the wizarding world, send a letter and expect it might be read by someone else. Umbridge intercepted Harry's mail without resistance. No one stopped her. In fact, it was perfectly legal. Encrypted messages, data protection, never heard of it. The mail system works as if there are no spies, enemies, or violations of rights to worry about. Number 7. Broomsticks, an unregulated mode of high-speed travel. Flying on a broom is one of the most exhilarating and liberating forms of transportation. But think about it. Apparition requires a license. Portkeys are strictly controlled. Flu powder is monitored. And brooms, buy one and take to the skies. No checks, no stops, no limitations. Kids fly around Hogwarts. Adults zip through towns. Is anyone keeping track? Only if you get spotted by Muggles, then maybe the Ministry will take notice. Number 8. Unregistered Animoji. Peter Pettigrew lived for 12 years as a rat. curled up on Ron Weasley's bed, sleeping in a Hogwarts dormitory, scuttling through corridors packed with students. No alarms, no ministry detection, just silence. He was an unregistered animagus, a rule-breaker hiding in plain sight. Sirius Black knew it, Remus Lupin knew it, James Potter had helped him learn. And yet no one in the ministry ever caught on. The law required registration, but the law meant nothing without enforcement. "He's at Hogwarts," Sirius shouted in Prisoner of Azkaban. "He's been there all the time, as Scabbers." 3 Animoji, James, Sirius, and Peter, transformed regularly during school. They did it to help Remus Lupin during his werewolf transformations. Noble, perhaps, but still illegal, and incredibly dangerous. The ministry had no idea they existed. Even decades later, they were never officially listed. One of them became a spy for Voldemort. Another escaped Azkaban. Yet no magical signature, no trace spell, no registry check ever revealed them. Animagus transformation is advanced magic. It should come with training, oversight, and tracking. But the system didn't fail. It simply didn't exist. Number 9, use of time turners. Hermione wore it around her neck, a tiny hourglass on a chain. A time turner. With a single twist, she and Harry stepped backward through time, unnoticed, unseen, moving among their past selves. In Prisoner of Azkaban, they used it to save Buckbeak and Sirius Black. But even Dumbledore warned, you must not be seen. One wrong move, one accidental encounter, and the entire timeline could collapse. Still, the Ministry approved it. Not for battle, not for crisis. But so Hermione could attend extra classes. A device capable of rewriting fate was handed to a 14-year-old to manage her schedule. The danger became real later in the Department of Mysteries. During the battle in Order of the Phoenix, shelves collapsed, the time turners shattered, time magic spiraled out of control. The Ministry said nothing, no public warning, no inquiry. The devices were quietly erased, as if they were never used. But they were, repeatedly. And if not for the caution of a few students, reality itself might have torn apart. All because someone thought a time travel device made a clever academic tool. Number 10, Muggle technology integration. The blue Ford Anglia soared over the train tracks, engine roaring, wheels spinning in the air. Harry clutched the door, Ron gripped the wheel, and the car dove straight toward the Hogwarts Express. In Chamber of Secrets, 2 underage wizards used a magically modified Muggle vehicle to fly across half of England. It crashed into the Whomping Willow. It nearly killed them. But no one from the Ministry came knocking. Arthur Weasley, who had enchanted the car in secret, broke a dozen laws about Muggle artifacts and got away with a small fine. Arthur worked in the misuse of Muggle artifacts office. He was supposed to stop this kind of thing. Instead, he spent his time enchanting rubber ducks and rewiring plugs. "What exactly is the function of a rubber duck?" he once asked, eyes wide with curiosity. It was charming, until you realized that no one at the Ministry was actually enforcing the laws he was meant to uphold. The rules were written, but never followed. The line between wizard and Muggle blurred more with every passing year. In Order of the Phoenix, the wizarding radio program Potterwatch used Muggle transmitters to reach hidden allies. Kingsley Shacklebolt and Lee Jordan broadcast updates using stolen equipment. It worked, but it also exposed them. The Ministry claimed it needed to preserve magical secrecy at all costs, but when rebels used Muggle tech, they looked the other way. "The Ministry has fallen," the radio crackled, and every witch and wizard tuned in. With Muggle radios powered by spells no one had permission to use, the contradiction was everywhere. Wizards wore robes but read Muggle books. They flew brooms but kept TV sets in their basements. They laughed at toasters but used enchanted toilets to travel. Number 11 House Elf writes, Dobby stood in the hospital wing, bandaged and weak, but smiling. "Dobby is free," he whispered, clutching the filthy sock Harry had tricked Lucius Malfoy into giving him. A sock. That was all it took to free a creature who had spent years in servitude, punished for disobedience, silenced by fear. No legal hearing, no contract, just a sock. The laws of wizardkind didn't see Dobby as a citizen, they saw him as property. For centuries, house elves served wizards without pay, without rest, without rights. In Goblet of Fire, Winky, Barty Crouch's elf, was dismissed not for wrongdoing, but for witnessing it. "Winky is a good elf," she cried, humiliated and broken, but even then no one questioned her treatment. Hermione tried. She founded SPEW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare. She made badges, she lobbied, she begged other students to care. They laughed. Ron rolled his eyes. The ministry ignored her entirely. At Hogwarts, dozens of house elves worked unseen in the kitchens, cleaning and cooking for hundreds of students. Dobby, the only one who wanted wages and time off, was mocked even by his own kind. "Dobby is a free elf and Dobby gets paid," he said proudly. But he was the exception. The system wasn't just broken, it was built on silence. Slavery was hidden under tradition. Cruelty was disguised as duty. The ministry never intervened, never issued guidelines, never questioned whether forcing intelligent beings into servitude was moral. They regulated broomsticks and potion ingredients, but not lives. House elves could be beaten, ordered to harm themselves, or bound to secrecy forever. No inspections, no protections, just generations of suffering under magical oaths, and the worst part? No one even called it wrong. Number 12. Safety at Hogwarts. A troll in the dungeons. That was the first warning. In Philosopher's Stone, Professor Quirrell burst into the Great Hall, pale and trembling, announcing, "Troll in the dungeons? Thought you ought to know." Chaos followed. Students screamed, teachers panicked, and 3 11-year-olds, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, ended up alone in a girl's bathroom, facing the creature head-on. No safety protocol, no evacuation plan, just a wild beast and children armed with basic spells. The ministry said nothing. Then came Fluffy, a 3-headed dog hidden on the 3rd floor, guarding a trapdoor, yes, but also accessible to any curious student. In Chamber of Secrets it got worse. A basilisk roamed the castle, petrifying students. One nearly died. And again it was students, not auras, who uncovered the truth. Harry followed the trail, spoke Parseltongue, and entered the chamber himself. "You will find I will only truly have left this school when none here are loyal to me," said Dumbledore. It was a beautiful line, but loyalty doesn't substitute for actual security. The ministry didn't intervene when Dementors surrounded the school in Prisoner of Azkaban. These soul-sucking creatures glided across the grounds, bringing cold and fear to every hallway. One nearly kissed Harry on the Quidditch pitch. "They're among the foulest creatures that walk this earth," Lupin said. Yet they were allowed, invited, to guard children. No protective barrier, no warning system, just hope and blind faith in ancient creatures with no empathy. By the time Death Eaters entered the castle, in Half-Blood Prince, the illusion of safety had fully shattered. Draco Malfoy used the Room of Requirement to create a secret passage. The Vanishing Cabinet led straight into the heart of the school. Dumbledore was killed on the Astronomy Tower, and the Ministry, as always, arrived only after the tragedy. Number 13. Magical Creatures and Their Containment. In the shadows of the Forbidden Forest, a creature stirred, massive, hairy, and intelligent. Aragog, the acromantula raised by Hagrid, built a colony of monstrous spiders mere steps from the school grounds. "He never harmed me," Hagrid would say with pride. But Aragog made it clear to Harry and Ron, "I cannot deny my children fresh meat when it wanders so willingly into our midst. This wasn't a secret." Aragog's existence was known, and still the ministry did nothing. No inspections, no removal, no containment. Just silence. It wasn't an isolated case. During the Triwizard Tournament, dragons were brought into Hogwarts without warning the students or their parents. 4 teenagers were told to face beasts that breathe fire and crush bones for the entertainment of the crowd. The Hungarian Horntail, the book read, was looking at him as though it was ready to attack. And it nearly did. The Horntail's flames seared the stadium. One wrong move and dozens of lives could have ended in seconds. Yet no ministry official stopped the event. They watched and clapped. Dragons, acromantulas, and even hippogriffs like Buckbeak, all powerful, all potentially deadly. The only time the ministry stepped in was when a creature harmed someone of importance, When Draco Malfoy faked injury, Buckbeak was sentenced to death. Not because he was dangerous, but because Lucius Malfoy had influence. The system wasn't built on safety, it was built on reputation and reaction. No magical creature registry was enforced, no map of dangerous habitats, no education for students on how to protect themselves beyond the odd lesson from Hagrid. The Ministry preferred to wait until something went wrong. By then, it was often too late. And when it comes to creatures that can fly, poison, or kill with a stare, too late can be deadly. Number 14, Legitimacy and Occluency. In the world of magic, some powers are more dangerous than spells or potions. Legitimacy, the ability to enter another person's mind, is one of them. Yet, the Ministry of Magic does not regulate it. Anyone with the skill can dig through memories and emotions, no consent required. In Order of the Phoenix, Severus Snape forces Harry into weekly occlumency lessons, saying coldly, "The Dark Lord is penetrating your mind, Harry. You must learn to close it." But the irony is brutal. Snape himself uses legitimacy during these sessions, often without warning, and certainly without Harry's agreement. Snape's actions aren't an isolated case. Lord Voldemort was a master legilimens, and he used the connection between himself and Harry to manipulate him emotionally, even drawing Harry into false visions. In one scene, Voldemort tricks Harry into seeing Sirius Black being tortured in the Department of Mysteries. That moment nearly cost lives. "He's got Padfoot at the place where it's hidden," Harry shouts, believing the vision to be real. But it wasn't. Voldemort exploited the lack of safeguards, proving how this power, left unchecked, could be turned into a weapon. There's no legal oversight, no registration for legilimens, no protocol for use. Anyone could invade someone's mind. Teachers, auras, strangers. Imagine, in our own world, if people could walk through your memories like a hallway of open doors. That's the reality in the wizarding world. And yet the Ministry remains silent. Not a word about ethical guidelines, not a single protective charm recommended for civilians. It's a gaping hole in magical law that no one dares to patch. Dumbledore himself was a skilled legilimens, though he rarely used it, and even he warned of its dangers. He once said, "It requires great skill and concentration, and not a little courage." But what he didn't say is that it also requires trust. Number 15, Bank Security in Gringotts. The vaults of Gringotts Wizarding Bank were once believed to be impenetrable, fortified by centuries of goblin magic, cunning enchantments, and deadly deterrents. Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe, except perhaps Hogwarts, Hagrid once claimed in the Philosopher's Stone. This statement echoed through the wizarding world like gospel, and yet by the final chapters of the saga, the great myth of Gringotts' invulnerability was shattered, not by a dark wizard, but by 3 teenagers armed with Polyjuice Potion, a few clever spells, and a dragon. The breach into the Lestrange vault in Deathly Hallows was not merely a plot device, it was a scandalous moment that exposed the fragile core beneath the iron shell of Gringotts' reputation. Hermione, disguised as Bellatrix Lestrange, managed to fool the goblin guards at the entrance, a testament not only to the power of Polyjuice, but also to how susceptible goblins were to deception. Despite their legendary suspicion and pride, they failed to detect a fraud walking into one of the highest security vaults in the nation. The truth was plain and embarrassing. The goblins had no defense against human cunning when it was wrapped in the face of one of their favored clients. The deeper the trio descended into the labyrinthine tunnels beneath Diagon Alley, the more the illusion of security unraveled. The infamous Imperious Curse inside the Lestrange vault was intended to replicate and multiply anything touched, a brilliant trap to deter thieves. But as the fake treasures began to avalanche over them, it was clear that the curse, while powerful, was indiscriminate and even dangerous to the vault's rightful owners. This defensive mechanism did not neutralize intruders, it merely created chaos. It was a wall of fire that could burn both the thief and the house it was meant to protect. Perhaps the most shocking part of the break-in was the creature chained in the depths, a pale, blind dragon kept in captivity and pain for generations, trained to fear clanging metal as a sign to retreat. It was this same creature that unwittingly became their escape route. In a world where magic can repel armies, the final breach of the bank's defenses occurred not through a curse or a spell, but through the sheer force of an abused beast flying toward the light. The dragon soared above Diagon Alley in broad daylight, taking with it the illusion that Gringotts was a fortress beyond reach. This wasn't a simple robbery. It was a cataclysmic failure of an institution, not just the failure of magical traps or goblin vigilance, but a philosophical failure, a failure of arrogance. For centuries, goblins were entrusted with the treasures, secrets, and legacies of the wizarding elite. They claimed to operate outside ministry control, asserting their ancient rights. But with no regulation or oversight, Gringotts became a closed system, immune to scrutiny. And as history has shown, systems that cannot be questioned are often systems that hide rot within. What does this say about the Ministry of Magic? Its hands-off approach to financial regulation allowed Gringotts to function as a state within a state. Goblins are not bound by the same rules as witches and wizards, and this legal autonomy, while culturally respectful, has proven to be a glaring weakness. There are no magical auditors, no checks on goblin decisions, and no mandated emergency response protocols in case of breaches. In fact, the ministry seemed more interested in what lay within vaults than how they were protected, until, of course, Voldemort's Horcrux was stolen right from under their nose. The Lestrange Vault was no ordinary deposit box. It contained Hufflepuff's cup, one of the most dangerous dark artifacts in existence, and a key piece of Voldemort's soul. Its presence there suggests a dangerous alliance, or, at the very least, a negligent ignorance. Did the goblins know what was being stored in their deepest vaults? If not, how can they claim to offer true security? If yes, why did they allow it? Either answer undermines the very foundation of their credibility. Griphook, the goblin who aided Harry and his friends, presents another layer of complexity. His motivations were not rooted in loyalty or justice, but in reclaiming the sword of Gryffindor, a goblin-made artifact he believed rightfully belonged to his people. The goblin's view of ownership differs fundamentally from wizard kind. Goblins believe that the creator of an item retains eternal ownership, and any payment is merely a rental fee. This difference in philosophy is more than cultural. It affects the very concept of property and protection. What use is a bank when the protectors don't believe the deposits belong to the depositors? After the escape, Gringotts was left in ruins, reputation-wise, if not structurally. The ministry was forced to reckon with a terrifying realization. The vaults beneath London could be compromised, and if 3 young wizards could achieve it under the pressure of a dark regime, what might an organized group of dark wizards accomplish in peacetime? The post-war reconstruction of the wizarding world required more than rebuilding buildings. It demanded a re-examination of who holds power and how it is checked. One might assume that such a catastrophic event would result in swift reforms, but the wizarding world, steeped in tradition and secrecy, resists change. There were whispers of ministry inspections, of new magical enchantments being added to the vaults, and of goblins holding emergency councils. Yet none of this was ever made public. Transparency is not a virtue in wizarding finance, and the public, eager to return to normalcy after the horrors of Voldemort's second rise, preferred to forget that the ground beneath their feet had nearly caved in. The break-in did more than damage Gringotts, it empowered others. If Harry Potter could rob the most secure vault in Britain, what message did that send to smugglers, artifact hunters, or vengeful ex-Death Eaters? In the absence of widespread arrests or visible consequences, the act became legend. Gringotts became not just a bank, but a story, a tale with a moral. No place is truly safe, not even one guarded by dragons. Number 16. Personal magical artifacts. In the shadowy corridors of the wizarding world, magic flows not just through wands and spells, but through artifacts, crafted objects of immense power, often forged with ancient knowledge and sometimes bearing consequences beyond imagination. These personal magical artifacts, wands, invisibility cloaks, time turners, move freely from hand to hand, often without oversight without record, and most dangerously without control. The Ministry of Magic, designed as the central pillar of law and order, appears curiously absent from this domain. The question, therefore, presses like a whisper behind every artifact-related disaster. Why does the Ministry not regulate these objects with greater precision? Consider the wand, not just any wand, but the Elder Wand, the most powerful ever made, carved from elder wood with a core of thestral tail hair. It passed through hands, soaked in blood and ambition. At one time, it was in the possession of Mikhail Grigorovich, the famed wand-maker of Eastern Europe. It was stolen from him by a young Gellert Grindelwald, already veering toward the dark arts. No registry flagged its disappearance. No aura came knocking at Grigorovich's door to investigate the loss of one of the most dangerous items in existence. A theft of this magnitude should have set off alarms across magical governments. It didn't. Years later, the same wand found its way into the hands of Lord Voldemort, the darkest wizard of the age. He took it from Dumbledore's tomb, a blatant desecration that the Ministry ignored, perhaps in fear, perhaps in ignorance. The Elder Wand changed allegiance, not through paperwork or official procedure, but through conquest and death. How can such a powerful artifact capable of immense destruction remain outside any legal framework? The wizarding community remains disturbingly complacent about this. Another example rests in the very hands of the boy who lived. Harry Potter's invisibility cloak was not a simple enchantment. It was a deathly hallow, a true cloak of invisibility that defied detection and decay. It was a cloak of true invisibility, and it had been passed down to him from his father, the books tell us. But the Ministry never documented this artifact, never inquired how a teenager acquired such a rare, magical item. The cloak allowed Harry to sneak into the restricted section, into the Ministry itself, and into enemy territory without detection. He never faced consequences, not even curiosity. This blindness from the authorities extends to one of the most dangerously sensitive magical items, the Time Turner. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Hermione Granger is given one to manage her academic schedule, an innocent enough reason, yet the potential risks are apocalyptic. Altering time, even by hours, carries catastrophic consequences. Dumbledore himself warns, "You must not be seen, Miss Granger, you know the law. Never use a time turner for anything other than the stated purpose." Yet this law is enforced more by the honor of the user than by oversight. The Ministry does, in fact, have a department of magical artifacts, but its scope is vague and its power limited. There is no centralized record of wand ownership beyond Ollivander's personal memory. When Voldemort returned and took another's wand, the Ministry didn't notice. It wasn't until his resurrection became undeniable that they began to track his actions, not his tools. What does this say about their priorities? Are they reactive rather than proactive? Or is it possible they prefer not to know, lest the weight of regulation collapse their bureaucratic structure? Even more troubling is the ease with which dark artifacts slip into circulation. The cursed opal necklace from Borgin and Burke's was responsible for nearly killing Katie Bell. The diary of Tom Riddle, an actual Horcrux capable of possession and manipulation, was slipped into a cauldron unnoticed. The Hand of Glory, a tool of thieves and assassins, was sold freely to Draco Malfoy. None of these artifacts appeared to be registered. There is no evidence that the Ministry investigated the vendors or attempted to confiscate remaining stock. Why is it that the wizarding world's black market flourishes so openly while its legal system slumbers? In The Half-Blood Prince, Ron is nearly poisoned by a cursed drink intended for Dumbledore. The artifact in question, a bottle of mead, was tampered with. Yet again, the Ministry had no prior knowledge or warning systems in place. One could argue that such items are too numerous to track. But the danger lies not in common charms, it lies in the powerful, rare, and often unique items that escape notice entirely, and these are precisely the items most often found in the hands of the powerful or the malevolent. Lucius Malfoy, a known Death Eater, once possessed the diary of Tom Riddle. He introduced it into Hogwarts not through force, but deception, handing it off to Ginny Weasley. The artifact operated under the Ministry's nose, unleashing a basilisk and nearly closing the school. It was only destroyed by a phoenix and a sword, not through any intervention by magical law enforcement. After the events, Lucius faced temporary disgrace, but again, no systemic changes were made. No registry, no protocols. Even the Order of the Phoenix, operating as a secret resistance, relied heavily on enchanted items for communication and transport. Extendable ears, enchanted galleons, and the enchanted photograph of the original order all functioned without registration. While the intention was noble, the method underscores the same issue. The Ministry either cannot or will not keep up with the flow of personal magical artifacts. Regulation does exist in fragments. There are laws against the use of certain items, such as the 3 unforgivable curses, but these laws target behavior, not objects. The wand that casts the killing curse is not confiscated. The artifact that allows possession or concealment is not seized unless caught in the act. The Ministry appears to wait for harm to occur before responding. In a world where magic can destroy cities, this is a troubling model. Number 17, magical diseases and epidemics. It is a curious thing that in a society where magic can mend bones in seconds and regrow skin overnight, the most terrifying threats often emerge not from curses or dark lords, but from illness, unpredictable, uncontainable, and grossly underestimated. Magical diseases and their consequences are an unspoken shadow trailing behind the glitter of wizarding life. And while St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries performs wonders within its green-tiled walls, the truth is bitter. The Ministry of Magic has failed its people. The existence of magical diseases is mentioned in hushed tones, often at the margins of stories. The most notable example, dragonpox, took the life of Albus Dumbledore's mother, Kendra. This illness, ancient and persistent, causes green scarring and boils, along with a dangerous fever. Dumbledore himself, one of the greatest minds in magical history, was marked by tragedy long before Grindelwald or Voldemort ever entered his path. Dragonpox is not only deadly but shamefully common. That the family of such a prominent wizard could not protect itself from it is a testament to how little has been done to contain or prevent it. And yet what has the Ministry established in the wake of such losses? We see no evidence of research initiatives, no public health campaigns, no magical equivalents of vaccinations. The disease persists across generations like an old, unhealed wound. Wizards whisper its name, but no one demands accountability. The hospital staff may treat symptoms, but no cures are developed, or if they are not shared. The illness remains, moving in shadows, claiming the old, the young, the fragile. Equally disturbing is the case of lycanthropy, known more commonly as werewolfism. This condition is not spread by accident or carelessness. It is transmitted by bite during the full moon, and the infected are forever transformed, marked by pain and rejection. Remus Lupin, a man of integrity and gentleness, lived a life of isolation not because of his morals, but because of his disease. He was denied jobs, stability, and dignity. It is very lucky that I am here to guide you this year. Werewolves are shunned by society, he once told his students, as if warning them of a contagious shame. The Ministry's response? Rather than provide support or medical guidance, it subjected those afflicted to tracking, discrimination, and suspicion. The Werewolf Registry, created to catalogue and monitor victims of lycanthropy, serves as a reminder not of protection but of prejudice. Fenrir Greyback, the notorious werewolf aligned with the Death Eaters, is often cited as the reason such controls exist. But the truth is more sinister. He became a monster, not merely because of what he was, but because of how society treated him. When people are hunted instead of healed, what else can they become? But it is not only physical diseases that haunt the magical world. There are psychological and magical conditions born from the very practice of spellwork. The Longbottoms, Frank and Alice, were tortured into insanity by Bellatrix Lestrange's use of the Cruciatus Curse. Their minds, shattered beyond repair, remain trapped in a ward of St. Mungo's for decades, unable to recognize their own son. Neville, ever quiet and gentle, would visit them and receive bubble gum wrappers in return, his mother's last flicker of recognition. It is perhaps the most haunting depiction of magical trauma, and yet there is no known path to recovery, no ministry-led effort to help such victims. We must ask, where is the Department of Magical Health? Where are the rapid response teams, the epidemiological task forces, the magical researchers hunting for cures? They do not exist, not in any consistent, institutionalized way. Illnesses are dealt with ad hoc, often only after they reach catastrophic proportions. When Arthur Weasley was attacked by Nagini and brought to St. Mungo's with venom coursing through his veins, it was not a specialist who saved him, but a makeshift team of healers working around the clock. His survival was due to luck and Molly Weasley's vigilance, not government preparedness. Even illnesses resulting from spell damage are neglected. Gilderoy Lockheart, the once famed author and braggart, became a long-term resident of St. Mungo's after a backfired memory charm. Though his case may evoke amusement to some, it underscores the danger of even common spells when misused. "He has no idea who he is," the nurse explained, when Harry and his friends encountered him. "He wanders around the ward, thinking he's still a celebrity." And what did the ministry do? Nothing. No warning labels on spellbooks, no regulation of spell education for children. Magic, it seems, is a privilege, not a responsibility. During the Second Wizarding War, the vulnerability of the magical community became terrifyingly clear. When the Dark Mark was sighted in the skies, panic spread like wildfire. Yet it was not only fear of death that gripped the people, it was the collapse of every institution meant to protect them. Diagon Alley emptied, shops closed, families fled their homes. If an epidemic had broken out during this time, and some suggest it did in remote areas, the ministry would have been paralyzed. Under Voldemort's shadow there was no health infrastructure left. It was every witch and wizard for themselves. There is also a darker side to magical ailments, the ones that are born from emotion, trauma, or uncontrolled power. Obscurial magic, known only to a few, emerges when a young witch or wizard represses their magic for too long. The result is catastrophic. Credence Barebone, the most famous Obscurial, caused mass destruction in early 20th century New York, his condition ignored until it was far too late. The magical governments of the world, including MACUSA and the British ministry, kept silent. Obscurials were labelled freaks or threats, not patients in need of urgent care. Number 18. Curses and forbidden magic in daily life. There is something chilling about the way a spell can change a life forever, not with beauty or healing, but with cruelty, control, or death. The unforgivable curses, Avada Kedavra, Imperious, and Cruciatus, are among the darkest tools of magic in the wizarding world. Officially, they are banned. Unofficially, they are wielded more often than most care to admit. Their existence in legislation does little to erase their presence in life. Like shadows, they cling to the corners of wizarding society, in homes, in alleys, behind closed doors, and in the minds of those who have suffered under their effects. The Cruciatus curse is perhaps the most haunting of them all. It does not kill, it does not control, merely causes unbearable pain, limitless, infinite. The victim cannot scream loud enough, cannot thrash hard enough to escape. Frank and Alice Longbottom knew that pain intimately. When Bellatrix Lestrange, alongside Rodolphus and Rabastan Lestrange, and Barty Crouch Jr. used Cruciatus on them, they didn't stop after a few seconds. They kept going until minds were shattered like glass dropped from a great height. They were tortured into insanity, Dumbledore once said, and those words were not poetic exaggeration. The Longbottoms would spend the rest of their days in St. Mungo's, unable to recognize their only son. And yet Bellatrix did not suffer the consequences immediately. It was only after the fall of Voldemort that she faced a trial. How could it be that someone so infamous in her actions had been left to walk free for any amount of time? The truth is unsettling. The Ministry of Magic, for all its proclamations of law and order, has always been selective in its enforcement of justice. Its departments are riddled with fear, politics, and bureaucracy. Consider the Imperious Curse, which strips its victim of will, a curse that turns men and women into puppets. During the First and Second Wizarding Wars, dozens of Death Eaters claimed they acted under Imperious to escape Azkaban. Lucius Malfoy, one of the wealthiest and most influential pureblood wizards, famously dodged imprisonment after the First War by insisting he had been under Imperious. There were no follow-up investigations, no veritaserum, no probing of memory, just acceptance because Lucius was rich, well-connected, and powerful. The dark irony is that the Ministry itself has used unforgivable curses. During the Second Wizarding War, auras were authorized to use all 3 unforgivable curses on Death Eaters. "Use them if you must," said Bartemius Crouch Sr., then head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. In their desperation to fight evil, they embraced it. The line between defender and oppressor blurred, and no apology followed. But how does the Ministry track these spells? How does it know when one has been cast? In truth, it doesn't. Outside of Hogwarts, where underage magic is monitored via the trace, adult magic is largely unregulated. The trace itself doesn't register the spell or the person, only that magic occurred near a minor. In rural areas, private homes, or the countless hidden corners of the magical world, there is no surveillance. No censor detects an Imperious Curse. No red light flashes when Cruciatus is spoken aloud. Which leads to a dark conclusion. The only reason some cases come to light is because the victim survives and speaks out, or because the perpetrator becomes careless. There is no magical force constantly watching. Justice depends on luck, noise, and sometimes vengeance. How many uses of these curses remain buried? How many abusers have never been named? Among the least-known cases is that of Elspeth Dawlish, the cousin of the well-known Aura John Dawlish. She was found wandering the streets of Knockturn Alley, muttering incoherently, with burn marks and bruises covering her arms. Rumours swirled in the Aura office. Some said she had been subjected to Cruciatus in her own home. Others whispered that her brother, a suspected follower of the dark arts, had practiced on her for years. But nothing was filed, no charges, no trial. She was placed in a quiet ward in St. Mungo's and never spoke again. Another disturbing case is that of a small village near Inverness, where a man named Malcolm Dunbar was believed to be controlling his neighbours with Imperious. They praised him constantly, cooked his meals, paid his bills, and even handed him their Gringotts keys. It was only after he vanished that the spell lifted. His house stood empty. No arrest was made. The Ministry never confirmed the case. It didn't appear in the Prophet. But the whispers still echo through the Highlands. What makes the matter worse is the cultural silence surrounding the use of dark magic in private households. Wizards do not talk about domestic abuse with wands. There is no department within the Ministry that addresses magical abuse unless it escalates to public spectacle. The Wizengamot does not entertain minor claims. Victims are often accused of hysteria or of wanting attention. The darker the spell, the more skepticism they face. The story of Seraphina Wren, a young witch from the Isle of Wight, is especially tragic. Her father was an accomplished curse-breaker, respected by the Ministry. At home, he would punish his daughter with mild hexes, jinxes that left welts, or temporary blindness. When she ran away at 17 and sought help, she was told that unless he had used one of the unforgivable curses, there was little that could be done. It's not illegal to discipline one's child magically, she was told. Seraphina's case was closed in 2 weeks. She later published a memoir, Under the Wand, which remains one of the few public accounts of magical domestic abuse. Avada Kedavra, the most feared of all spells, leaves no mark. That is part of its horror. A person simply drops dead, their eyes wide open, as if startled by death's arrival. The curse cannot be blocked, only dodged. And unless a witness testifies to its use, how can one prove it happened at all? A wand scan might confirm it, but only if the wand is recovered. In a world where death can be so sudden, untraceable and silent, it's no wonder that Avada Kedavra is the favorite of assassins. A case from 1963 illustrates this. Reuben Caro, a wizard with known ties to dark circles, was found dead in his home. No wounds, no poison, no sign of a struggle. The official cause was listed as magical heart failure, a term often used when officials cannot, or will not, pursue further inquiry. Years later, his daughter revealed that her uncle had confessed to killing Reuben with the killing curse after a financial dispute. Again, no charges followed. The uncle had long since died. The ministry's failure to investigate and prosecute such crimes reveals a larger problem: the culture of fear and favoritism. A wizard from an old pureblood family is far less likely to face justice than a half-blood or muggle-born. The laws may be written in ink, but their enforcement is drawn in the shifting sand of politics and influence. What about magical duels? They are, after all, legal under certain circumstances. But what if, in a duel, one wizard uses an unforgivable curse? The lines again blur. In 1997, Augustus Rookwood was seen using the Cruciatus curse in a skirmish during a ministry raid. Yet no immediate action was taken. By then the war had reached a point where such behavior became background noise, one more horror in a growing sea of them. It's worth noting that even Hogwarts, a school under the strict eye of Dumbledore and later McGonagall, was not immune to the influence of unforgivable curses. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Mad-Eye Moody, or rather Barty Crouch Jr., demonstrated all three curses on spiders right in front of students. "Now the Cruciatus curse," he said, before subjecting the tiny creature to spasms of agony. "That's illegal, you know," Hermione whispered. But no one stopped him. Not then, not later. The curse, even in lesson form, was left unpunished. This suggests a kind of normalization. When a spell is taught, even under the guise of education, it becomes something the mind is less likely to fear. If a young wizard sees an authority figure cast Cruciatus in a classroom, how long before they wonder what it feels like to use it themselves? Finally, we must ask, do unforgivable curses truly disappear from a society because they are outlawed, or do they simply become the tools of those who are careful enough to hide them? A magical world without oversight, without justice for the voiceless, becomes a breeding ground for hidden cruelty. For every Bellatrix who boasts in court, there are 5 others who whisper curses behind locked doors, their crimes buried in silence. The danger lies not just in the spells, but in the system that pretends they are rare. The truth is darker. The curses are here. They always have been. And they are used more often than anyone dares to admit. Number 19, Hogwarts Curriculum Oversight. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry stands as the crown jewel of magical education in Britain. Its towering spires and ancient walls have sheltered young witches and wizards for centuries, shaping the magical minds of future generations. Yet despite its storied history and prestige, a startling truth lies just beneath the surface. Hogwarts operates with a shockingly low level of governmental oversight. In a world where children are taught to wield deadly spells and handle volatile magical creatures, one would expect rigorous checks and balances, and yet the reality is far more chaotic, even dangerous. Consider Remus Lupin, a competent, intelligent, and kind-hearted man who served as the defense against the dark arts professor during Harry Potter's 3rd year. His lessons were among the most practical and effective the school had seen in years. He taught students how to face real threats: boggarts, redcaps, grindylows, creatures they might truly encounter outside the safety of Hogwarts. But Lupin carried a secret that should have set off every alarm within the Ministry's Department of Magical Education. He was a werewolf. A registered one, yes, but a werewolf nonetheless. The risk was not merely hypothetical. Severus Snape himself, in a rare moment of blunt honesty, declared, "You are letting a werewolf teach your children." POA, Ch. 22. Had the Ministry been conducting even the most basic background checks on faculty appointments, Lupin's condition would have surfaced immediately. It's not that he was unqualified. Far from it. But the lack of any oversight allowed Albus Dumbledore to make a decision that could have ended in tragedy. That it did not is a credit to Lupin's character, not to the soundness of the system. Then there is Gilderoy Lockheart, the infamous fraud who taught defense against the dark arts in Harry's second year. Here was a man whose qualifications were fabricated, whose supposed accomplishments were stolen memories from real heroes. The wizarding world saw him as a celebrity author, and Hogwarts hired him on reputation alone. Lockhart was not merely ineffective, he was dangerously inept. When attempting to mend a broken arm, he removed all the bones instead. When faced with Cornish pixies, he lost control of his classroom within seconds, and in a moment that perfectly encapsulates the dangers of unchecked faculty appointments, Lockhart attempted to obliviate 2 students in the Chamber of Secrets using a spell he barely understood. The wand exploded with the force of a small bomb, KOS Ch. 16. That a charlatan could be entrusted with the education and safety of hundreds of students reflects a near-total absence of vetting or performance review, nor is Lockhart an isolated case. Throughout the series, we see individuals with deeply troubling pasts or affiliations placed in teaching positions. Severus Snape, one of the most controversial figures in the series, served as potions master for over a decade. While his mastery of the subject is unquestionable, his past as a Death Eater should have raised serious ethical and legal concerns. The Ministry was well aware of his background. Even Fudge admits that Snape had once been a known supporter of Voldemort, only cleared by Dumbledore's personal testimony. And yet there was no inquiry, no restriction, no supervision. Snape, unlike Lupin, was not hiding a dangerous condition. He had made a conscious choice to align with dark forces in his youth. His bitterness, his cruelty, and his blatant favoritism made him a source of constant fear and emotional abuse for many students. Neville Longbottom's boggart, which transformed into Snape, spoke volumes about the professor's effect on his pupils, POA Ch. 7. Yet there was no mechanism to address these issues, no student or parental feedback system, no inspections from the Ministry. The absence of structured evaluation becomes even more troubling when we remember that Hogwarts is not merely teaching theory, it is giving minors access to spells that can maim, hex, or even kill. The students learn Expelliarmus, Petrificus Totalis, and even Sectum Sempra, the last of which was hidden in an old textbook and nearly killed Draco Malfoy in the 6th book. Imagine a Muggle school allowing unsupervised chemistry experiments with volatile compounds under the guidance of a teacher with an ambiguous past. The uproar would be immediate. Yet in the wizarding world, education appears to fall under the total control of the headmaster. Albus Dumbledore, though widely respected, wielded near autocratic authority over the institution. When he chose to bring in Sybil Trelawney as divination professor, a woman with a single true prophecy to her name and a penchant for dramatic predictions, no one questioned the move. Her classes were filled with vague foretellings, incense smoke, and nonsense. And while some students enjoyed her dramatics, others learned nothing of real value. When Hermione Granger, one of the most studious witches of her time, dropped the subject, it said more about the curriculum than it did about her interests. Ironically, the only moment in the entire series where the Ministry of Magic attempts to assert control over Hogwarts is in Order of the Phoenix, when Dolores Umbridge is appointed as High Inquisitor. This, however, was not a move driven by concerns about educational quality. It was a political maneuver, a way to suppress dissent and control the narrative around Voldemort's return. Umbridge's approach was authoritarian, her methods cruel, and her classroom policies regressive. She banned practical magic, enforced rote memorization, and used corporal punishment in the form of blood quills. This misguided intervention underscores the Ministry's fundamental misunderstanding of what oversight should look like. Rather than establishing a transparent, accountable system of evaluation and certification, they sent in a sadistic bureaucrat with a personal agenda. The result was disastrous. Students were unprepared for real danger. They formed Dumbledore's army out of desperation, teaching themselves the spells Umbridge had forbidden. Ironically, the students in that moment took their education more seriously than the adults did. Furthermore, Hogwarts lacks a formal system for certifying or licensing its professors. There is no evidence that teachers undergo regular evaluations, training updates, or pedagogical reviews. In the Muggle world, educators must pass exams, obtain licenses, and often pursue continuing education. At Hogwarts, it appears that Dumbledore simply appoints teachers as he sees fit without external consultation. Take Hagrid, for example. A beloved character, fiercely loyal and undeniably brave, but a qualified teacher? Questionable at best. His passion for magical creatures is clear, but his lack of training leads to dangerous situations, such as the incident with the Hippogriff Buckbeak and Draco Malfoy. Hagrid meant well, but his classes often place students in real danger. The blast-ended Scroots in particular, creatures that exploded unpredictably, became infamous among his students. Yet there was no intervention, no ministry inquiry, no corrective training. Contrast this with the scrutiny applied to teachers in even modest Muggle schools, where a minor injury might lead to lawsuits, investigations, and professional repercussions. Hogwarts, by comparison, operates in a realm of almost total internal discretion. This is a school that once allowed Barty Crouch Jr., a Death Eater using Polyjuice Potion, to teach an entire year under the guise of Mad-Eye Moody, and no one noticed. He managed to smuggle in an illegal Triwizard Cup portkey and nearly delivered Harry into Voldemort's hands. How did no one question this? How did no authority, magical or otherwise, ever verify the identity of such a high-risk appointment? If a Death Eater can assume a teaching position at the most prestigious magical school in Britain without detection, what does that say about security protocols? The Triwizard Tournament itself, hosted at Hogwarts in Goblet of Fire, serves as another stark example of the school's lack of external regulation. A deadly competition, previously banned due to its high fatality rate, was resurrected in a school setting. Students were placed in life-threatening situations, facing dragons, merpeople, and a maze full of lethal traps, for the sake of inter-school cooperation. The Ministry approved it, yes, but clearly failed to provide adequate safety measures. The death of Cedric Diggory, while ultimately the work of Voldemort, occurred within the framework of this sanctioned event. In the broader context, this raises a terrifying question. Who is ultimately responsible for the safety of Hogwarts students? The Board of Governors is mentioned rarely and seems to serve more as a ceremonial body than a governing one. Lucius Malfoy, a member of the board during the events of Chamber of Secrets, used his position for political leverage rather than educational reform. When Dumbledore was temporarily removed, it was not due to failing academic standards, but under pressure from Lucius and his associates. Again, personal politics trumped pedagogy. Perhaps the most unsettling reality is that despite all these incidents, the werewolf teacher, the fraud, the Death Eater in disguise, the sadist from the Ministry, nothing changed. There was no formal inquiry after the Battle of Hogwarts. No new policies were introduced. No education reform appears in the final chapters or the epilogue. Hogwarts continues, presumably, just as it always has, under the wise but unchecked authority of its headmaster or headmistress. The magical world trusts its educators to do the right thing. That trust is noble, but dangerous. In a society where even children can learn to kill with a flick of the wand, the margin for error must be zero. Hogwarts is a school unlike any other, and it should be held to standards higher than any other. Yet time and again, the series reveals a troubling truth. While Hogwarts teaches magic, no one is teaching Hogwarts how to be accountable. Until the wizarding world comes to terms with that, until a system of responsible, transparent, and competent oversight is introduced, the students of Hogwarts will remain brave, brilliant, and woefully unprotected. Number 20. Memory charms and mind manipulation. There is a terrifying power hidden beneath the surface of the wizarding world, and it does not take the form of a monstrous beast, a dark curse, or a malevolent artifact. It is a single word, soft in its syllables, but devastating in its implications. Obliviate, a charm uttered in a heartbeat, and entire lives unravel. Memories, those delicate threads that define our identity, are not only mutable in the magical realm, they are disposable. This is not a matter of mere secrecy. It is a sanctioned practice, performed casually as though erasing a person's experiences were as mundane as mending a torn robe. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, we meet a man who weaponized memory to build an empire of lies. Gilderoy Lockheart, the ministry-decorated author and celebrity, was not the hero he portrayed himself to be. Yes, I received the Order of Merlin 3rd class, he boasted. But the truth was darker. Lockhart tracked down real heroes, witches and wizards who had faced werewolves, vampires, banshees, and with a smile erased their memories after stealing their stories. "The thing is, I'm rather good at memory charms," he admitted with pride. Good at destroying lives, he might as well have said. His entire career was a testament to how devastating and unchecked the spell Obliviate could be. Memory in the magical world is not sacred. It is malleable, twistable, a tool of conveniency. Wizards use it not only for cover-ups, but for personal comfort, vengeance, or even laziness. Consider the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, home to the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office and the Obliviator Headquarters. The very existence of an entire office dedicated to memory wiping reflects a profound truth, that tampering with minds is bureaucratically accepted. When a group of Muggles spots a dragon flying over Devon, Obliviators are dispatched without delay. They don't just remove the memory of the dragon, they erase moments, rewrite events, and distort reality. The implications are staggering. Each spell severs a thread in the tapestry of a life. A woman might forget her engagement proposal because a Hungarian horn tail passed overhead. A child could lose his memory of a family vacation because a rogue wizard made a broomstick crash into the beach. These are not small losses, they are fundamental experiences, irreplaceable moments. The wizarding world sees them as collateral damage in the name of secrecy. Yet there is no public outcry, no ethical debate, no oversight committee. Obliviate is cast and forgotten, both by its target and by society. The Ministry of Magic, for all its love of rules and procedures, remains mysteriously silent about the abuse of memory charms. When Gilderoy Lockheart rose to fame on the backs of his victims, no investigation followed. When his deception unraveled at Hogwarts, the Ministry made no attempt to prosecute him. His final act, trying to erase the memories of Harry and Ron in the chamber, resulted in poetic justice. The backfired charm robbed him of his own mind, leaving him a shell of his former self. But his punishment was not judicial. It was accidental. There is a haunting irony in Lockhart's fate. The man who erased others became erased himself. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry visits St. Mungo's and finds Lockhart still lost in mental fog. "Hello," he says brightly, not recognizing the boy who helped destroy him. The hospital staff speak of some improvement, but it is clear his memory is gone, likely forever. The tragedy is evident, but so is the hypocrisy. The same spell he used to manipulate others ultimately claimed him, but it did so without legal consequence. No reparations were made to the real heroes he silenced. The use of Obliviate is not limited to individuals. It is institutional. After the Quidditch World Cup in Goblet of Fire, chaos erupts as Death Eaters terrorize Muggles. The Ministry swoops in to erase the memories of every non-magical witness. "It's been a long night," said Arthur Weasley grimly, helping with cleanup. But this cleanup involved altering the consciousness of dozens, if not hundreds of people. These victims would awaken with inexplicable blanks in their minds, unaware of the terror they narrowly survived. Their memories are rewritten for the convenience of wizards. What does it mean to alter a person's memory? In Muggle terms, it would be akin to an involuntary lobotomy or deep brain surgery without consent. It is the theft of agency. When Hermione Granger modified her own parents' memories in Deathly Hallows, it was an act of love, cloaked in tragedy. She made them believe they were different people, Wendell and Monica Wilkins, and implanted false ambitions in their minds. "I've obliviated them," she whispered. "They think they're really called Wendell and Monica Wilkins." It was selfless, yes, but also a horrific demonstration of power. She took away their identity to keep them safe. The moral burden of Hermione's decision is rarely discussed. She permanently altered her parents' lives without their knowledge. The act was not temporary, it was designed to be irreversible. Her courage is undeniable, but so is the ethical dilemma. She did not just remove memories, she implanted lies. How does a daughter live with the knowledge that her parents walk the earth as different people, smiling at each other across breakfast tables built on illusion? Memory is the soul's archive. In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore gathers and stores memories in his pensive, treating them as precious artifacts. He sifts through them like a scholar, seeking truth in strands of thought. I sometimes find, and I am sure you know the feeling, that I simply have too many thoughts and memories crammed into my mind. Dumbledore's reverence for memory contrasts sharply with the casual use of obliviate elsewhere. To him, memory is a source of wisdom. To others, it is a tool to be erased, shaped, or ignored. The wizarding world's handling of memory mirrors its elitism. Magic gives its wielders the power to manipulate the weak. Muggles, powerless to defend themselves against charms, are the primary victims of obliviate. They are not asked for consent. They are not told the truth. Their reality is adjusted by strangers in cloaks. This is not protection, it is domination. A society that prides itself on secrecy does so at the expense of innocent minds. In Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Newt Scamander witnesses the consequences of magical exposure in 1920s New York. MACUSA, the Magical Congress of the United States of America, orders the obliviation of the entire city after a magical creature rampage. A magical potion is dispersed into the rain, causing millions of nomads to forget what they saw. "They won't remember a thing," says Seraphina Pickery. But memory is not a disposable thing. These people experienced trauma, wonder, and confusion, and all of it was washed away with weather. The larger issue is not just memory loss, but manipulation. Obliviate is not always used to erase specific moments. It can be used to rewrite history. A victim may be made to believe something that never happened. The Ministry's Department of Mysteries contains rooms devoted to thought and memory, evidence that wizards have long studied how to edit the mind. There is no guarantee that obliviate simply deletes. It may restructure, reframe, and reshape. What if the charm were used to implant loyalty, to suppress rebellion, to rewrite allegiances? This possibility echoes in the shadows of Dumbledore's own plans. While the headmaster himself never used obliviate, his manipulation of Harry's knowledge was deliberate. He withheld information about the prophecy, about Snape, about the Elder Wand. His secrecy shaped Harry's path. If memory is power, then so is withholding it. The distinction between omission and obliviation grows thin when motives blur. The line between dark magic and sanctioned charm becomes blurry. A memory charm may not carry the stigma of the Cruciatus or Imperious, but its impact can be just as permanent. When Bertha Jorkins went missing in Goblet of Fire, it was because Voldemort tortured her for information long buried under magical tampering. Crouch Sr. had modified her memory so brutally that it left damage. "She had a memory charm put on her by Crouch," said Dumbledore. "It was so strong it made her forget an entire series of events. That one spell made her vulnerable to death." Memory is not a toy, it is a life or death matter. Even among children, the culture of forgetfulness takes root. At the end of Chamber of Secrets, Dumbledore says, "The truth is a beautiful and terrible thing and should therefore be treated with great caution." Yet the truth in the wizarding world is often erased for convenience. The school ghosts whisper of forgotten tragedies. Portraits hang smiling but silent, filled with centuries of memory no one bothers to ask about. Memory, everywhere, is both sacred and discarded. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect is the silence that follows. The victims of Obliviate do not protest, they cannot. Their memories are gone, they don't know what they've lost. The spell erases not only experiences, but the knowledge that anything is missing. It is the perfect crime. In a world built on stories, Obliviate is the erasure of narrative. It is literary annihilation. A life without memory is a book with pages torn out. There are no known limits to how often Obliviate can be used, nor is there a system to track its application. Auras may carry wands, but not accountability. If a wizard were to systematically erase his partner's memories to hide abuse or betrayal, who would stop him? The charm is silent, clean, and undetectable. There is no magical black box, no safeguard against misuse. The Ministry tracks wand usage, but not memory alterations. This is the true scandal, not the spell itself, but the absence of justice surrounding it. In the end, the wizarding world must confront a truth far more frightening than any Dark Lord, that it has normalized the destruction of identity. The charm Obliviate is more than a tool, it is a cultural blind spot. It represents the ease with which a society can trade integrity for silence, truth for control. Memory is not merely the past, it is the soul's compass, and in the hands of the careless, it is all too easy to lose the way. Number 21. Mental health in the wizarding world. The magical world of Harry Potter dazzles readers with flying broomsticks, enchanted creatures, and brave children facing darkness with wands in hand. But beneath the shimmering surface of spells and secrets lies a curious silence, an absence so resounding that it shakes the foundations of a world supposedly brimming with wisdom and ancient knowledge. In a society where children battle death itself before they're old enough to vote, where trauma hides in every corridor and shadow, there is no mention of therapists, counselors, or any structured psychological care. The trauma begins early. For Harry Potter, the cupboard under the stairs was more than just a storage space. It was a prison of neglect. Raised without affection, bullied and malnourished, Harry entered Hogwarts carrying years of emotional scars. Yet the school offered no mental health evaluation. No adult asked what he had been through. He was handed a wand, told he was famous, and expected to thrive. This is not the only troubling case, but it is perhaps the clearest example of how systemic the issue is. Hogwarts, a school that teaches children to duel, does not teach them how to heal. Cedric Diggory's death during the Triwizard Tournament marked a chilling moment in the series. Harry witnessed it up close. Cedric died suddenly and without warning, the Avada Kedavra curse tearing through the air before Harry's eyes. The aftermath? Harry was sent back to Hogwarts as if nothing had happened. The closest he came to professional support was a cryptic conversation with Dumbledore, filled with half-truths and moral instruction. Dark and difficult times lie ahead, Dumbledore told him. But where was the healer for the boy who had seen his peer murdered? Where was the adult who would sit beside him and say, "It's okay to feel broken"? The Order of the Phoenix reveals the deep psychological toll that trauma has taken on Harry. He is irritable, withdrawn, prone to outbursts of anger, and plagued by dreams that blur the lines between reality and memory. In the Muggle world, a child presenting such symptoms after witnessing death would be flagged for PTSD. In the Wizarding world, Harry is merely scolded. His distress is brushed aside even by his closest allies. When he insists that Voldemort has returned, the Ministry brands him unstable, a danger. Instead of help, he is given suspicion. Even Sirius Black, Harry's godfather and a man who spent over a decade in Azkaban, receives no psychological care upon his release. We are told that Dementors suck away happiness, leave prisoners hollow and despondent. But once Sirius escapes, he is thrown into the role of guardian with no time to recover from what was, by all accounts, prolonged torture. His moments of emotional instability, his mood swings, his reckless behavior are never addressed. No healer, no counselor, no friend sits down to help him navigate the aftershocks of imprisonment. The absence of psychological care is institutional. St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries lists everything from spell damage to creature-induced injuries, but nowhere in its grand hallways is there a ward for psychological trauma. Even the Longbottoms, who were tortured into madness by Bellatrix Lestrange, are not shown receiving therapeutic care. They are simply locked away in a permanent state of damage. "They do not recognize me," Neville says, his voice steeped in quiet resignation. The implication is clear. The magical world understands how to heal the body but not the soul. Hogwarts, for all its grandeur, is perhaps the most dangerous boarding school in literature. Students face basilisks, werewolves, and Death Eaters. They fight in wars before they even graduate. Yet there is no school counselor, no mandated recovery sessions after traumatic events. When Katie Bell is cursed by a necklace in Half-Blood Prince, her terrifying near-death experience is addressed medically, but no one asks how she is coping emotionally. She returns to school pale and shaken, a ghost of her former self. And life goes on. Remus Lupin, one of the kindest characters in the series, carries deep emotional wounds. His condition as a werewolf made him a social outcast for much of his life. He internalized shame and isolation, yet he is left to manage it all alone. Even during his time at Hogwarts as a professor, Lupin must hide his condition, reinforcing the notion that psychological differences or conditions with emotional consequences are things to conceal, not confront. "I was a coward," he tells Harry in Deathly Hallows, reflecting on his own behavior. But was he a coward, or was he a man left to face his demons alone? The Department of Mysteries in the Ministry of Magic holds many secrets, including a room devoted to love, but there is no department for mental health. There is no team assigned to assist victims of war, no hotline for grieving families, no program to reintegrate former Death Eaters into society with compassion and care. When the Second Wizarding War ends and the dust settles over the ruins of Hogwarts, we hear nothing about how the survivors are supported. Lavender Brown lies mauled by Fenrir Greyback. Fred Weasley is dead. Colin Creevey, a boy of 16, killed in battle. How does one return to classes after that? The books never say. Tom Riddle himself is a tragic byproduct of neglect and unchecked psychological trauma. Raised in a loveless orphanage, isolated and emotionally volatile, Tom showed early signs of sociopathy. Yet instead of intervention, he was given a wand and praised for his power. No one asked why he tortured animals, no one guided him through his rage. Dumbledore suspected something dark inside the boy, but offered no structured support. "I can make things move without touching them," young Tom said. "I can make animals do what I want them to do without training them." Alarming words, and yet no action was taken. Even Bellatrix Lestrange, unhinged and fanatical, is treated as a villain without ever exploring the roots of her descent. Her cruelty is legendary, but we know little of her inner world. Could her madness have been prevented? Could a society that valued mental well-being have caught her before she fell into darkness? The wizarding world doesn't ask such questions. It punishes, it imprisons, but it does not heal. Severus Snape, too, is a character drowning in unresolved pain. Tormented as a child, humiliated at school, rejected in love, and later conscripted into double-agent status, his life is a storm of inner conflict. He becomes bitter, vengeful, isolated. But imagine if someone had spoken to him early on, someone who could have helped him channel his pain into something other than resentment. Instead, Snape hides behind sneers and sarcasm. He is lauded for his bravery only after death, but while alive he was broken, and no one reached out. The wizarding world romanticizes stoicism. Bravery is defined as silence in the face of agony. Emotional repression is seen as strength. Harry himself embodies this throughout the series. "I'm fine," he often says when he is clearly not. The adults around him allow it. They admire his resilience but fail to see the cost. By the end of Order of the Phoenix, Harry's anger and grief have reached a boiling point. He lashes out, he isolates himself, he feels alone. And still no one refers him to a therapist. Dumbledore is the closest thing Harry has to a mentor, yet he withholds the truth until it becomes a burden too great. His belief in Harry's inner strength is noble but misguided. "I cared about you too much," he admits in Half-Blood Prince, after a lifetime of withholding vital truths. Love in the magical world is often shown as sacrifice, but what about nurturing? What about active care? Dumbledore, too, is haunted by his sister's death, by his own ambition, by Grindelwald, but he processes it in isolation, believing that to suffer in silence is the path of the wise. When Luna Lovegood is kidnapped by Death Eaters, she endures captivity with her characteristic calm. But what happens after? We see her in the Great Hall, comforting others, being her ethereal self. But who comforts her? Who helps her unpack the experience of being a child prisoner in a war not of her making? Trauma does not vanish with victory, it lingers, it settles into the bones. Dean Thomas, Seamus Finnegan, and countless other students witness horrors during the Battle of Hogwarts. We never hear their stories, we never see the aftermath. War is messy, it breaks people, but the epilogue skips over all that, giving us 19 years later, all is well. But is it? Did Harry ever seek help for the nightmares that must have plagued him? Did Neville ever speak to someone about watching his parents lose their minds? Did Draco ever reconcile with his choices? The final insult to psychological care in the wizarding world may be the fate of Barty Crouch Jr., a young man who was tortured by his parents into servitude, later brainwashed and abused by Voldemort, and finally sentenced to a Dementor's kiss, a punishment that erases the soul. No effort was made to understand the roots of his fanaticism, no attempt at rehabilitation, just erasure. The wizarding world chooses oblivion over understanding. J.K. Rowling gave us a rich universe filled with magic, but in doing so exposed a chilling blind spot, a world that saves lives with spells but cannot mend broken hearts. Magic can regrow bones, reverse curses, and deflect death itself, but it cannot provide a safe space to cry. This is not just an oversight. It is a fundamental flaw in a society that claims to value wisdom. If Hogwarts were real, the bravest room would not be the room of requirement. It would be a small, warm office with a fireplace and 2 chairs, a place where Harry could say, "I saw my friend die," and someone would answer, "Tell me everything." Not with potions, not with spells, but with presence, with listening, with care. Until then, the magical world remains incomplete, not because it lacks dragons or time-turners, but because it does not yet understand that true healing begins when someone says, "You are not alone." Number 22. Wand licensing and weapon control. In the wizarding world, the wand is far more than a mere tool. It is a conduit of deadly power, a finely tuned instrument capable of channeling life-altering magic. It is, by all definitions, a weapon. Yet in the magical society described in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series, this weapon is distributed to children as young as 11 without licenses, background checks, psychological assessments, or even basic training on ethical use. This practice, accepted and even romanticized, raises profound questions about safety, accountability, and moral responsibility in the magical community. When Harry Potter walks into Ollivanders for the first time, he is just a boy, fresh from a cupboard under the stairs, unaware of the powers slumbering within him. He is offered a variety of wands until one chooses him, a phoenix feather core, 11 inches, holly, nice and supple. The process takes mere minutes. There is no one to assess whether Harry is fit to wield such power, no counsel to weigh his potential. He walks out of the shop with the magical equivalent of a loaded firearm, completely unsupervised. "The wand chooses the wizard," Ollivander says cryptically, but this poetic notion masks a disturbing truth. Children are handed weapons without any meaningful restrictions. The Ministry of Magic, which so often interferes in the minutiae of magical life, from fireplace inspections to the misuse of flying carpets, has curiously little to say when it comes to wand regulation. The only semblance of control is the trace, a magical enchantment placed on underage wizards that alerts the Ministry if spells are performed in the presence of muggles, but even this system is flawed. The trace does not differentiate who cast the spell, only that magic occurred near a minor. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Harry is nearly expelled after Dementors attack him and Dudley, despite acting in self-defense. As you have already received an official warning for a previous offense under Section 13 of the International Confederation of Warlocks Statute of Secrecy, we regret to inform you that you are hereby expelled from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, reads the letter from the Ministry. But no one investigated whether Harry himself cast the spell or if another magical presence was involved. The idea that wands are not tracked or monitored once the trace wears off at age 17 is astonishing. In the Muggle world, weapons are catalogued, often engraved with serial numbers, and distributed under strict regulation. Imagine a society where children receive guns on their 11th birthday and are expected to regulate themselves with a vague warning to behave. That is essentially the magical world's approach to wand ownership. Once a wizard comes of age, the trace is lifted, and they are free to carry and use their wand anywhere, anytime, without documentation or oversight. No database records who possesses which wand. There is no wand registration office. There are no magical equivalents to firearms safety courses, psychological evaluations, or periodic recertifications. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Hermione uses Bellatrix Lestrange's wand to impersonate her at Gringotts. Not only is she able to use it effectively, but no one, not goblins, not ministry officials, questions the legitimacy of her possession. This highlights how easy it is to take, steal, or otherwise acquire another's wand and use it. The fact that a wand can be taken through disarming spells or violence and then used by the new owner undermines any argument for security. During the final battle at Hogwarts, wands change hands repeatedly. Harry eventually defeats Voldemort with the Elder Wand, a weapon that passed through allegiance and bloodshed, not paperwork or any formal authorization. The Elder Wand itself is a chilling symbol of the magical community's ambivalence toward weapon regulation. The most powerful wand in existence, crafted from elder wood with a thestral tail hair core, has a bloody and violent history. Dumbledore, who possessed it until his death, chose secrecy over transparency. No laws prevented him from owning it. No magical council required him to explain why he held a weapon of near limitless power. And when Draco Malfoy inadvertently became its master by disarming Dumbledore, no one noticed. Does the wand in fact know its last master was disarmed? Harry asks. The answer is yes. But the authorities, including the all-knowing Ministry, remain oblivious. Crimes committed with wands are hard to trace because, unlike Muggle weapons, they leave no obvious fingerprint unless caught in the act. The magical world has no equivalent of gunpowder residue or ballistic trajectories. Spells do not leave recoverable evidence in most cases, making one crime dangerously untraceable. Consider the murder of Hepzibah Smith, allegedly committed by her house elf, Hokey. In reality, it was Tom Riddle, later known as Voldemort, who poisoned her and framed the elf. There was no forensic evidence linking him to the crime. The Ministry accepted the false confession and closed the case. A magical weapon had been used, a woman died, and the killer walked free, because the wand was never considered a key piece of evidence. Even among auras, who are essentially magical law enforcement, the rules around wand use are vague. Nymphadora Tonks, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and Alastair Moody regularly perform dangerous and aggressive magic, but no indication is given that they require special licenses for offensive spells. The unforgivable curses, an Imperious Cruciatus and Avada Kedavra, are technically illegal, yet they are taught to fourth-year students by Barty Crouch Jr., posing as Mad-Eye Moody. No one notices, no safeguards exist. even when used by ministry officials, as in the case of Bartemius Crouch Sr. against his own son, the use of unforgivable curses goes largely unchecked. Then there is the question of civilians using wands for personal justice. Molly Weasley kills Bellatrix Lestrange in a duel during the Battle of Hogwarts. The act is praised as heroic, but no investigation follows. Bellatrix was undeniably a terrorist, but Molly is not a trained aura or soldier. She wields her wand with lethal intent, and the magical justice system does nothing. If a Muggle civilian were to kill a terrorist, they would face questioning, perhaps even trial. The magical world, by contrast, seems to embrace vigilantism when it suits the narrative. Wands can be smuggled, transfigured, or hidden in plain sight. Unlike Muggle weapons, they don't require metal or gunpowder, but they are made from wood and magical cores, often from creatures like unicorns or dragons. They are easy to conceal, transport, and even enchant to avoid detection. In Goblet of Fire, Barty Crouch Jr. impersonates Mad-Eye Moody for almost a year using Polyjuice Potion. He carries a wand and uses it regularly, fooling even Dumbledore. No magical security system identifies the wand as being in the wrong hands. This raises a haunting point. Identity theft with a wand is not just possible, but unpreventable. Children duel in school corridors with potentially lethal consequences. In Chamber of Secrets, Draco Malfoy attempts to cast Serpensortia at Harry during the dueling club, a spell that produces a real snake. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry uses Sectum Sempra on Draco in the bathroom, slashing him across the torso and leaving him bleeding and nearly dead. There is no wand license revoked, no spell restrictions applied, no academic probation. Severus Snape heals Draco, and life continues. Imagine a student stabbing a classmate in a Muggle school and walking away with a warning. Even the protection spells taught at Hogwarts, shield charms, stunning spells, and disarming spells, are all tools of combat. Students are trained in magical dueling as a matter of course, yet they are not taught the ethics of magical violence. They are shown how to fight, not when or whether to fight. The Defense Against the Dark Arts curriculum is more militaristic than judicial. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry secretly teaches students how to use combat spells, effectively forming a student militia known as Dumbledore's Army. This is considered rebellion, but the concept is never challenged as dangerous. No adult intervenes to question whether it is safe for children to train with weapons unsupervised. The magical world's refusal to establish licensing stems perhaps from a cultural notion that wizards and witches are inherently self-governing. Magic is tied to identity, and a wand is seen as an extension of the self. To control the wand is to control the wizard. This philosophy, however noble, is naive. Power without oversight breeds danger. Tom Riddle was a child when he used his wand to terrorize classmates. Gellert Grindelwald was still a teenager when he explored the limits of magical dominance. Both went on to become threats to the world, and both were armed by a system that asked no questions. At no point in the series does the Ministry of Magic consider implementing wand control reforms, even after 2 Wizarding Wars. Their priorities remain firmly on secrecy from Muggles rather than safety within their own society. The Statute of Secrecy is aggressively enforced, but murder, torture, and coercion using wands are not tracked unless committed by known Death Eaters. One cannot help but wonder if this blind spot exists because the magical elite benefit from it. Restricting wands would mean restricting privilege, and the ruling class, including the Malfoys and Fudges of the world, are unlikely to surrender control willingly. The irony is that for a society so advanced in magic, the wizarding world remains primitively governed. There are no standardized legal pathways for wand acquisition after school. A squib could buy a wand if they wished. No law stops them. A criminal, fresh out of Azkaban, could acquire a wand the next day. In The Half-Blood Prince, we learn that Draco buys a vanishing cabinet to smuggle Death Eaters into Hogwarts, but who questions how they came armed and ready? No wands are confiscated, no magical customs stand guard. In the end, the absence of wand licensing is not a quirk. It is a systemic flaw. It reflects a deeper denial in the magical world, that power must be wielded, not questioned, that the right to magic is inherited, not earned, that violence is acceptable so long as it is veiled in robes and Latin incantations, but power without accountability is not magic, it is chaos in disguise, and as history, magical and muggle, teaches us time and again, such chaos always demands a price. Number 23. Dueling and lack of official rules. In the world of Harry Potter, where spells can break bones, minds, or even end lives, one would expect dueling to be regulated with the precision of a ministry statute. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. Magical duels are scattered across the books like sudden thunderstorms, erupting without warning, without rules, without oversight. They happen between children, in dusty corridors, between professors in candlelit halls, and between the most powerful, dark and light wizards in the echoing chambers of power. But no matter how devastating, how public, or how illegal the outcome, the wizarding world responds with a curious shrug. Take the infamous midnight duel between Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy in their first year at Hogwarts. Draco challenged Harry with no formal process, no permission from a teacher, and no consequence afterward. The meeting took place in secret, in the trophy room at night, a clear violation of school rules. But the greater concern lies not in the curfew, but in the assumption. 11-year-old students were ready and expected to engage in a possibly violent duel. It didn't occur to Draco, nor to Ron or Neville, that such a thing needed adult supervision or formal boundaries. This was a cultural norm, an unspoken rite of passage, and therein lies the heart of the problem. Magic in J.K. Rowling's universe is potent, deadly, and emotional. Wands act not only as tools, but as extensions of intent. A single spell can permanently disfigure, stun, or kill, and yet there exists no globally accepted dueling code akin to what one might find in the world of fencing or martial arts. No governing board for magical discipline in one-on-one combat. The closest one gets is the dueling club established by Gilderoy Lockheart, a man so unqualified he managed to disarm himself. The club itself dissolved into chaos in its first session when Harry and Draco began firing hexes at each other. The moment Harry summoned a serpent, the lesson descended into panic. That single encounter showed the glaring flaw in the system. Children wielding unfiltered power with no structure to protect themselves or others. The duel between Dumbledore and Voldemort inside the Ministry of Magic is perhaps the most famous example of lawless magical combat. Two of the greatest wizards of their time engage in a cataclysmic battle, destroying fountains, hurling fire, manipulating water like a weapon, all in the very heart of Britain's magical government. The atrium is reduced to a battlefield, the golden statues are shattered, the ministry's own security seems to vanish, and afterward, no arrests, no tribunal, no public record. The mess is cleaned up, the truth is buried. Cornelius Fudge, then Minister for Magic, is more concerned with the political implications than the legal consequences. No formal investigation follows, no charges for dueling in a public space, damaging government property, or endangering lives. It is a surreal silence, a willful denial by a system that should have imposed order. Consider the Battle of the Seven Potters. In this operation, the Order of the Phoenix attempts to transport Harry to safety, and they are ambushed by Death Eaters. The skies are filled with curses and falling bodies. Mad-Eye Moody is killed. George Weasley loses an ear. The event takes place in open air, over Muggle roads and neighbourhoods. Hundreds of spells are cast in what is essentially aerial warfare. Yet again, the Ministry, though partially infiltrated at the time, issues no formal statement. No public inquiry, no magical Geneva Convention is invoked. The cost of combat is borne by individuals. The system watches and does nothing. Throughout the series, this pattern repeats. Duels, no matter how violent or personal, remain private affairs. There is no licensing for who may duel. No age restriction. No training. When Sirius Black and Bellatrix Lestrange duel in the Department of Mysteries, It ends with Sirius being thrown through the veil, effectively dying. There is no mention of Bellatrix being hunted for that specific crime. Her presence in the Ministry is alarming enough, but the duel itself, a murder arguably, passes without a formal reckoning. Come out, little Sirius," she mocks before striking, but no court ever hears that voice again. Even more troubling is the duel in Half-Blood Prince when Draco Malfoy uses the Cruciatus Curse on Harry during an ambush in the Hogwarts Express. Later in the year, Harry strikes back with Sectum Sempra, a spell invented by Snape that slashes Draco across the chest and abdomen, nearly killing him. Blood floods the bathroom floor. It is one of the darkest moments in the series. And how is it handled? A warning. A few detentions, no formal charges, no wand confiscation, no magical probation. A spell that could have severed arteries is treated like a schoolyard prank gone too far. And what's worse, Harry found that spell in a textbook. No regulatory authority banned it. No institution controlled the distribution of such knowledge. It was a miracle Draco survived. The concept of magical discipline is further eroded when Snape himself uses legitimacy, a deeply invasive magical art, against students. Occluency lessons, meant to protect Harry's mind, become a battlefield of their own. There are no rules governing the ethical use of such techniques, no magical consent forms. In fact, it is assumed that any skilled wizard may peer into the thoughts of another, whether for defense or domination. The absence of guidelines leaves vulnerable minds exposed. And in the case of Snape and Harry, it fosters resentment, trauma, and manipulation, all beneath the official gaze of the Hogwarts staff. Even the unforgivable curses, those supposedly most tightly regulated spells, are used with alarming frequency. The Cruciatus Curse is cast by multiple characters, Bellatrix, Harry, Neville's parents' torturer, with barely any repercussions. Harry himself uses it twice, once on Bellatrix and once on Amicus Carrow, the latter of which is fueled by fury and vengeance. The killing curse is used more than once in open combat, notably during the final battle at Hogwarts. But no governing body steps in, no license is revoked, no inquiry is launched. The spells are forbidden only in name, not in practice. One might argue that the Ministry is simply incompetent or too overwhelmed by Voldemort's threat. But the truth is older and deeper. Magical dueling is part of wizarding culture, embedded in its myths, its stories, its education. Consider the Triwizard Tournament, a state-sponsored event that includes deadly tasks and pits, teenagers against dragons. Physical danger is normalized, combat is glorified. From Merlin's time to modern Hogwarts, the duel is seen as a noble means of settling disputes, regardless of the risks. There is no incentive to regulate it because it is a tradition, and traditions resist oversight. But the cost is real. The first time Harry truly experiences battle is in the graveyard of Little Hangleton. He duels Voldemort, a boy of 14, against the most feared dark wizard of the age. He is expected to survive based not on training, but instinct. "Don't break the connection," echoes in his mind as he is dragged into a magical tug-of-war that should have ended in death. No other world, magical or muggle, would expect a child to fight a war criminal with no support. But in the wizarding world, this is par for the course. Even in the climactic battle of Hogwarts, the final duel between Harry and Voldemort happens without ceremony, without protocol. It takes place in the Great Hall, surrounded by corpses and survivors, while spells fly like gunfire. The spell that ends Voldemort's life is not a killing curse, but Expelliarmus, a disarming spell, ironically the first Harry ever learned. It symbolizes not just the power of non-violence, but the complete breakdown of magical law. No one steps in to stop the fight. No official declares the terms. It is war, but it is also chaos. The lack of structure leads to a more dangerous idea, that magical justice is personal, not institutional. vengeance becomes acceptable. Dueling replaces courts. Protection depends on personal power, not legal safety. It is a world where might makes right, and moral clarity is left to the individual. In such a world, someone like Bellatrix can duel for fun, and someone like Dumbledore can duel for peace, but the system treats them equally. There are no referees in war. One cannot ignore the role of Hogwarts itself in this culture. The school teaches children to use powerful magic, but offers no formal instruction in conflict ethics. Defense against the dark arts teaches students how to respond to threats, but never addresses how to restrain themselves in duels. Even during the final year, when Hogwarts becomes a military camp under the Carrows, students are encouraged to duel each other in brutal training sessions. Violence becomes routine. There is no curriculum for mercy. This institutional neglect leads to generational trauma. Neville Longbottom grows up in the shadow of his tortured parents, the result of magical combat, unregulated and unpunished. Severus Snape lives a life twisted by violence, regret, and double-dealing, shaped by years of dueling on both sides of the war. Harry, Ron, and Hermione suffer injuries, curses, and psychological scars. These are not battlefield heroes, they are children caught in an unstructured world where every argument can escalate to magical violence. The case of Alastor Mad-Eye Moody is a telling one. A seasoned auror, he is known for capturing dark wizards, often through duels, but even he operates more as a vigilante than an officer. His methods are feared, not celebrated. His house is fortified like a bunker. His eye never stops moving. He is the logical end of a system without rules, paranoid, ruthless, and ultimately alone. His fate is not glorious, but pitiful. He dies in an ambush, betrayed by the very lawless forces he once helped unleash. And so the wizarding world turns. It survives not through order but through improvisation, through heroes like Harry who refuse to kill, and through survivors like Neville who find courage in chaos. But the system remains broken. Duels continue, spells are cast, lives are ended, and the silence of Oversight lingers, as powerful as any curse. Number 24, emotion and will-altering spells. It is perhaps the most unsettling truth of the magical world. Wizards and witches possess the ability not only to inflict pain, but to reach directly into the mind and will of another person. Unlike curses that break bones or hexes that swell limbs, these spells violate something more sacred: agency. They reach past the flesh, curling like smoke into the spirit. And the most frightening aspect is not the spells themselves, but the world's indifference to them. The Imperious Curse stands atop this dark pyramid. Classified as one of the unforgivable curses, Imperio grants the caster total dominion over another's will. As described in the fourth book, Harry felt a floating sensation, as though every thought and worry had been wiped gently from his mind. It was the most wonderful feeling. That calm euphoria is the final surrender. Under the Imperious Curse, a person may murder their own family, rob a bank, betray their country, without even knowing they've done so. It is a complete annihilation of choice, wrapped in silken threads of mental bliss. But not every spell of control bears the heavy label unforgivable. Within the hallowed halls of Hogwarts and the bustling alleys of Diagon, lesser-known incantations work their quiet magic, spells like the Calming Charm, the Suggestion Hex, or the infamous Love Potion. These tools of manipulation are legal. Worse, they are casually accepted. Cast a jinx, and you may find yourself in detention. Cast a charm that sways emotion or dulls anger, and you may be rewarded for de-escalation. Take, for instance, the case of Romilda Vane. A fifth year at Hogwarts, Romilda laced chocolates with a potent love potion intended for Harry Potter. As fate would have it, Ron Weasley ate them instead. His mind was not simply clouded, it was replaced. He raved about his feelings for Romilda, entirely unconnected from reality. His love wasn't real, it was chemical bondage. When he collapsed shortly after from a poisoned mead, the joke turned almost fatal. Yet Romilda was never punished. In a Muggle context, such an act would constitute assault, perhaps even attempted coercion. But the magical world, drenched in tradition and riddled with grey morals, brushed it off. Hogwarts, that beacon of magical education, issued no consequence. No professor questioned the ethics of artificial love. No prefect took the matter to the headmaster. In the wizarding world, tampering with a person's feelings is no more alarming than adjusting the temperature of tea. And then there are the charms of allure, often taught to older students in elective courses such as advanced charms, or even used jokingly by older witches in social situations. These are designed not to control outright, but to subtly bend perception. A flick of the wand, a whispered incantation, and suddenly the caster seems more likable, more persuasive. A teacher might unintentionally favor a student. A boss might sign a document against better judgment. These spells don't force, they influence. But the outcome is manipulation all the same. Slughorn, the ever-gregarious potions master, was known for his collection of favored students. While he never cast charms on them, the potential for a student to use suggestive magic to earn his favor was dangerously real. What if Tom Riddle, in his early years, had used a calming charm before interrogating Professor Slughorn about Horcruxes? What if the charm softened Slughorn's unease, made the memory easier to shape? Would the result not be the same, a manipulated moment, forever altered? Even Albus Dumbledore, the great moral pillar of the magical world, was not immune to these dangers. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, he admits to having given Professor Trelawney a job partly out of guilt and protection, but one cannot help but wonder how often might Trelawney have used a mild confundus charm to smooth over her failures. A bit of mist over the eyes, and her ramblings became prophecy. After all, as Dumbledore noted, sometimes I find I have to remind myself that she has actually made 2 real predictions. And it was precisely such fogs of manipulation that marred the trial system of the magical world. The Wizengamot, the Wizarding High Court, never demanded veritaserum in all hearings. Some trials lacked proper review entirely. In the first war against Voldemort, many pleaded that they were under the Imperious Curse, but how could anyone prove otherwise? A victim of mind control looks just like a willing servant. The line between victim and perpetrator becomes fogged, leaving justice groping blindly. Barty Crouch Jr., masquerading as Mad-Eye Moody, taught the unforgivable curses to a room full of 4th years. While the lesson was terrifying, it was also revealing. As Neville Longbottom trembled, confronted by the memory of his tortured parents, the classroom remained silent. No law barred Moody from demonstrating the Cruciatus curse on a spider. Though the same curse had driven Neville's mother to madness, that such magic could be exhibited without regulation is a stain on Hogwarts itself. Emotional manipulation also played a role in propaganda and public control. The Ministry of Magic, under Cornelius Fudge, and later Pius Thicknesser, while Imperious, released statements, manipulated media, and even charmed objects to soothe public unrest. The undesirable number 1 poster of Harry Potter wasn't just a warning, it was emotionally charged rhetoric intended to incite fear and loathing. If the ministry had chosen to lace their daily profit articles with subtle calming charms or suggestion hexes, would the population have ever noticed? Even among students, such magic created a silent battleground. Luna Lovegood, constantly ridiculed, may have been spared had she resorted to a mild attention-grabbing charm. Lavender Brown's obsession with Ron Weasley, whether natural or enhanced by a minor attraction spell, blurred the line between affection and artificiality. And what of Draco Malfoy? Had he ever used charms to command loyalty, to temper rebellion within his gang of Slytherins? These incidents point to a cultural rot, an apathy toward psychological autonomy. In a society where minds can be softened, redirected, and intoxicated with a flick of the wand, trust becomes a currency both fragile and easily forged. Why argue or persuade when a simple charm will suffice? Why build rapport when emotion itself can be molded like clay? The lack of regulatory infrastructure only worsens the problem. There are no known government departments dedicated to magical ethics. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement handles criminal spells, but not emotional coercion unless it crosses into an unforgivable category. There are no licenses for empathy-based charms, no guidelines on when it is acceptable to use suggestion magic in education, commerce, or relationships. Everything operates on a vague moral honor system, a dangerous foundation in a world built on power. Gilderoy Lockheart, the charming fraud of Chamber of Secrets, built an entire career using Obliviate, erasing memories of real heroes and claiming their feats. He didn't simply manipulate memory, he erased agency. The victims lived false lives, never knowing what had been taken from them. Though ultimately exposed, his crimes went unchecked for years. One might ask, if he had instead used a spell that only influenced the memories rather than erasing them, would anyone have noticed? What happens when such spells are turned on a parent by a desperate child, or a teacher by an ambitious student? What protections exist for love under the influence of emotional charm work? The wizarding world, for all its spellbooks and scrolls, seems to lack a code of magical consent. Even Hogwarts, the first line of education, offers no course on magical ethics beyond a brief warning in defense against the dark arts. The emotional landscape of a wizard is more volatile than that of a muggle, not only because of adolescence or tragedy, but because their very feelings may be altered without consent. There is no true privacy of the mind. Even the occlumency taught to Harry in Order of the Phoenix is a rare and secretive discipline. Most never learn it. Most are never told they should learn it. This absence of boundaries affects magical creatures too. House elves, already bound by ancient magic, are further controlled by emotional manipulation. Dobby weeps in both fear and joy, his emotions easily triggered by kind or cruel words. Is this natural devotion, or centuries of magical conditioning? And what of the goblins, the centaurs, the werewolves? Have they been victims of such charms reshaped to fit the comfort of wizards? In the end, the question remains, in a world where emotion can be fabricated and willpower rewritten, can love, trust, or belief be said to truly exist at all? If a spell can create devotion, what separates that from slavery? If calm can be conjured like a draught, what value does true peace hold? This is the unspoken terror of magic, not the dragons or Death Eaters, but the smiling classmate who knows just enough charm work to make you laugh when you shouldn't, to win a favor you didn't mean to give, or to shift your emotions subtly until you're no longer yourself. And worse, you'll thank them for it. Only those who resist such temptations, like Harry, who fought the Imperious Curse again and again, can hope to live freely in such a world. Only those who question the ease of magical influence can guard what makes them human, because when magic touches the heart and mind, it does not leave fingerprints, but it does leave scars. Number 25. Muggle interference. The Ministry of Magic has long maintained that its role is to protect both the magical and non-magical communities from harmful interference. Official proclamations declare that any breach of the statute of secrecy or unjustified interaction with Muggles must be swiftly punished, and yet evidence shows a startling discrepancy between these claims and the everyday reality. In truth, the magical world not only interacts with the Muggle world frequently, but often carelessly, sometimes with tragic consequences. Consider the curious case of Arthur Weasley, head of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office. Known for his deep fascination with Muggle inventions, he frequently enchants everyday non-magical items, cars, plugs, even telephones. "What exactly is the function of a rubber duck?" he once asked, wide-eyed with wonder. His curiosity, though charming, has resulted in several incidents. Most infamously, he bewitched a Ford Anglia to fly, which later crashed into the Whomping Willow, creating a scandal that very nearly exposed the entire wizarding world. Had any Muggle witnesses seen the enchanted car soaring over Devon, the Ministry might have had far more to answer for than a dented tree. What remains unspoken is that Arthur's behaviour is hardly an isolated example. Throughout Wizarding Britain, there is a casual disregard for the sanctity of Muggle life and property. Wizards frequently hex, charm, or transfigure Muggle possessions for amusement or convenience. But the most disturbing cases are those where magic is used directly on Muggles, often with little thought to ethics or consequence. A chilling incident took place in the summer of 1994 when the Quidditch World Cup was held on English soil. After the match, Death Eaters, masked, hooded and gleeful, launched an attack on a group of Muggles, torturing them by levitating their bodies high into the air and spinning them in grotesque configurations. These Muggles were entirely innocent, a man, a woman, and their children, chosen simply because they had been employed to maintain the magical campsite. Muggle baiting, as it is known in certain dark corners of magical society, is not only cruel, it is tolerated more often than one might think. In the aftermath of the attack, the Ministry performed an obliviation operation, erasing the memories of the victims. But who decides when it is acceptable to erase a human being's memories? Who determines the boundaries of such power? No court proceedings followed, no charges were filed. The event disappeared from the official narrative like the memories from those Muggles' minds. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement insists it supervises all magical activities that might endanger the secrecy of the wizarding world. However, the office responsible for memory modification, the Obliviator headquarters, is notoriously secretive. Reports of its operations are sealed. Even the Wizengamot, the highest court of magical law, rarely reviews cases involving Muggles. Wizards much prefer to settle things quietly, a former Obliviator stated under anonymity, even when they shouldn't. The troubling truth is that Muggles have no advocate within the wizarding system. No one represents their interests. No voice speaks for them in the corridors of the Ministry. Magical laws are made by wizards, enforced by wizards, and broken, almost always, with impunity. The magical population, being small in number and secretive by nature, has developed a culture of insularity that allows them to ignore the moral complexity of their actions toward Muggles. Transfiguration, for instance, has been used on Muggles in deeply disturbing ways. During Gilderoy Lockhart's brief tenure at Hogwarts, he proudly recounted stories of having turned a troublesome Muggle woman into a goat to subdue her complaints during one of his expeditions. Later, it was revealed that many of these tales were fabrications, yet the underlying behavior that a wizard could and would transfigure a human without consent was not seen as particularly horrifying by magical society. If anything, it was considered quirky. Even in more reputable circles, the misuse of magic on Muggles is often brushed aside. Take, for example, the use of the Imperious Curse. In The Goblet of Fire, Barty Crouch Jr. used it to enslave his own father and several Ministry workers while hiding under the guise of Mad-Eye Moody. In a shocking confession, he revealed, "I had him under the Imperious Curse. I was able to control every word he said, every action he performed." While this situation involved Ministry insiders, it remains entirely plausible that many such curses have been applied to unsuspecting Muggles. Who would ever know? More than once, Muggle homes have been enchanted or destroyed during wizarding confrontations. The most glaring example occurred during the Second Wizarding War, when Voldemort's followers attacked Muggle families who had unknowingly lived on magical land. The Ministry's response was often too late. Muggle newspapers reported unexplained house fires and disappearances. Internally, wizards knew the truth. Externally, they wiped the slate clean with a few flicks of a wand. The deepest irony lies in the purpose of the Statute of Secrecy itself. Established in 1692, it was meant to protect both Muggles and magical folk by separating their worlds. But over time, the statute has become a tool of control. It does not prevent wizarding interference. It prevents accountability. Every time a Muggle is hexed, charmed, manipulated, or obliviated, the statute is invoked not as a safeguard, but as a shield against justice. Few within the magical community ever questioned this. Dumbledore, one of the few voices of conscience, once wrote, "We wizards have mistreated Muggles for centuries. It is a failing we must confront with honesty, not with denial." Yet even Dumbledore allowed such practices to continue around him. whether it was the casual use of memory charms or the broader ministry policy of silence. In recent years, younger witches and wizards have begun to challenge these practices. Hermione Granger, known for her activism, once created the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, but her empathy extended far beyond house elves. During her years in the ministry, she reportedly pushed for a regulatory body to oversee magical interactions with muggles. However, internal resistance was fierce. "They don't want oversight," she confided to friends. "They want obedience and silence." There is no department within the ministry that audits how often obliviation is used. No magical organization reports statistics on spells cast against muggles. In any just society, such powers would require transparent documentation. But in the magical world, erasing memories is as easy and as unexamined as cleaning a teacup. The question no one dares ask is how many muggles have vanished from their lives because of magic? How many are in mental institutions after encounters they couldn't explain? How many have suffered and continue to suffer in silence, never knowing what truly happened? When Sirius Black escaped from Azkaban, the Ministry placed the entire Muggle world at risk by failing to inform non-magical authorities. Rather than coordinate with Muggle law enforcement, they relied on Dementors, soulless creatures that indiscriminately drain happiness and sanity, to patrol areas filled with innocent people. The Dementors even attacked Harry Potter himself on Privet Drive, a purely Muggle neighborhood. Had Mrs. Figg, a squib, not intervened, the results could have been catastrophic. What oversight existed to prevent such reckless endangerment? None. The Ministry considered its actions justified by the secrecy it maintains, not the safety it claims to provide. Time and again, the evidence points to a culture of magical superiority, a quiet but dangerous belief that muggles are lesser. Wizards and witches may not speak the words aloud, but their laws, their practices, and their silence suggest a hierarchy where muggles occupy the bottom rung. Even something as simple as a memory charm as used by Gilderoy Lockhart in Chamber of Secrets can go horribly wrong. When he attempted to modify the memories of Harry and Ron with a broken wand, the spell backfired and left him permanently damaged. Imagine if this had been attempted on a muggle. Would anyone have noticed? Would anyone have cared? One of the most damning indicators is that no magical child is formally educated about ethical interactions with muggles. At Hogwarts, students are taught how to defend themselves, how to duel, how to transfigure, but not how to respect. There is no class on Muggle rights, no discussion of the moral weight of memory alteration. If anything, Muggles are treated as an occasional footnote in history of magic, usually as the clueless other. The cumulative weight of these examples cannot be ignored. While the Ministry claims to stand for protection, the facts suggest something else entirely. An unregulated, often dangerous series of magical intrusions into a world that cannot defend itself. The damage is real, even if the memory of it has been erased. There is no single villain behind this system, no dark wizard orchestrating the oppression of muggles. The problem is far more insidious. It lies in indifference. It lies in the normalization of power without accountability, in the quiet hum of obliviation spells cast daily, unseen, unchecked, and unquestioned, until the magical world begins to hold itself to account, to track and audit its own behaviors toward non-magical people, to create protections not just for itself, but for those it could harm. This hypocrisy will persist. And every day it does, more muggles will suffer silently, their memories stolen, their dignity erased, and their humanity ignored. Because for all their magic, wizards have yet to learn the most important spell of all: responsibility. Number 26. Storage and destruction of dangerous artifacts. The wizarding world is a place of immense wonder, but also of dangerous carelessness. Across centuries, magical objects have been forged, imbued with deadly curses, corrupted by dark magic, and left behind to wait in silence until an unsuspecting hand sets them loose again. The diary of Tom Riddle, the locket of Salazar Slytherin, the ring of Marvolo Gaunt, all these artifacts carried a malevolent will of their own. And yet, what is truly chilling is not just the existence of such items, but the world's striking inability or unwillingness to track, secure, and destroy them properly. Consider the diary. It appeared in the hands of a young girl, Ginny Weasley, who had no idea she was communing with the lingering consciousness of Lord Voldemort himself. The diary did not whisper its secrets in a forbidden vault. It did not wait beneath layers of enchantments in a secure ministry department. No. It sat on a shelf at Borgin and Burke's before being handed off to Lucius Malfoy like a trinket. A Horcrux, one of the darkest magical creations in history, passed from hand to hand like a borrowed book. And this was not a century ago. It happened in recent history, in the lives of those still walking Diagon Alley. This failure is not isolated. The locket of Slytherin, another Horcrux, passed from the sea cave where Voldemort hid it, to the home of the Black family, to the hands of a house elf named Creature, and then to Dolores Umbridge, who wore it around her neck. A chain of transfer so informal, so casual, that it defies belief. How could such a toxic item be allowed to circulate freely in the very heart of the Ministry of Magic? This locket was so saturated with dark power that it twisted the hearts of those who wore it. Even brave souls like Harry, Ron, and Hermione found themselves poisoned by its influence. One would imagine that after the defeat of Voldemort, a grand effort would be made to collect every artifact of darkness, to understand them, to disarm them, to lock them far beyond reach. But no such effort seems to have truly existed. The wizarding world prides itself on tradition, but tradition, in this context, means complacency. The Department of Mysteries, with all its shadowy brilliance, does not appear to hold a registry of cursed items. There is no centralized magical database, no enchanted archive with alerts for dark enchantments pulsing across the land, and yet they are everywhere. Helena Ravenclaw, the ghostly daughter of Rowena, admitted that the diadem of her mother, turned Horcrux by Voldemort, lay forgotten in the Room of Requirement for decades. He lied to me. He said he only wanted to learn how to destroy it, she had said of Tom Riddle. But the boy who became Voldemort had instead hidden it within the walls of a school filled with children. Hogwarts, the most secure place in Britain, also turned out to be one of the most neglected in terms of inventory. A room that could become anything concealed one of the darkest items in the wizarding world. The Ring of Marvolo Gaunt, too, sat alone in the ruins of a cottage, surrounded by enchantments, yes, but accessible. Albus Dumbledore, one of the most powerful wizards alive, found it easily enough, and paid the price. It cursed him the moment he touched it. And this is a man who knew what he was dealing with. What then of the others who might stumble upon such remnants? Muggles who dig too deep. Curious children with inherited attics full of trinkets they don't understand. If the world of wizards had taken the time to create a living map of dangerous magical items, many lives could have been spared. Regulus Black would not have died seeking to destroy the locket. Dumbledore's hand might have remained untouched by fatal curses. Ginny Weasley might never have been possessed. But the world of magic moves slowly, often trapped in a kind of time loop, where new dangers are always met with ancient reactions, secrecy, denial, and waiting for the storm to pass. After the Second Wizarding War, Kingsley Shacklebolt took over as Minister for Magic. His reputation as a just and modern leader brought hope, but there is little record of any sweeping reform regarding the handling of dangerous artifacts. Aurors continue to work bravely, but there is no known magical equivalent of a radioactive containment facility, no standard enchantment that neutralizes dark objects. Each time, it is up to individual heroes to intervene. Each time, they pay a personal price. Even the Sword of Gryffindor, a sacred relic that absorbs what makes it stronger, remains largely outside institutional control. After the war, it was returned to Hogwarts, but who safeguards it now? Who ensures it is not corrupted again? After all, this sword destroyed Horcruxes by absorbing their venom. What if, one day, it absorbed too much? And what of objects that are not Horcruxes, but are still inherently dangerous? The cursed necklace that nearly killed Katie Bell in Half-Blood Prince had been for sale at Borgin and Burke's for years. There was no ban, no regulation, no warning sign. A simple touch sent a girl to St. Mungo's. who regulates such things? Who audits these shops of shadows? The Ministry's Office of Magical Equipment Control seems woefully inadequate, a mere name rather than a force. In the Muggle world, powerful objects are inventoried, secured, monitored, and guarded. Yet in the Wizarding world, something as destructive as the Resurrection Stone can lie hidden under a pile of leaves in the Forbidden Forest. A deathly hallow. A tool that could bring souls halfway back to life. Forgotten like a lost toy. One must ask, why is it arrogance, the belief that magic is too rarefied, too noble to be tamed by bureaucracy? Or is it fear that to gather such items in one place is to tempt catastrophe? But even scattered, they cause havoc. Ignorance is no shield. The Wizarding world lives dangerously close to its own doom, pretending that containment is unnecessary so long as evil remains hidden. Perhaps this is why so many artifacts resurface at pivotal moments. Evil is not patient, it is opportunistic, and when careless hands leave the tools of destruction scattered across the world, darkness does not need to reinvent itself, and it only needs to reach out. The Ministry had a chance. After the war, a dedicated team could have been formed. The Department of Dark Artifact Disposal, specialized witches and wizards trained in dismantling enchantments, tracing magical signatures, and investigating magical black markets, a team that could have tracked the web of dangerous items, tracing their lineages and movements. Instead, the burden has fallen, again and again, on school children, outlaws, and solitary investigators. There is even precedent. The unspeakables, those mysterious operatives of the Department of Mysteries, are trained to deal with the most complex magical phenomena. Why not extend their purview to include cursed items? Or expand Gringotts' infamous security protocols to store neutralized artifacts in a sub-level away from prying eyes? The goblins, after all, understand value, but they also understand danger. Yet none of this has been formalized. Perhaps the most egregious example of institutional failure lies in the story of the Hufflepuff Cup. This Horcrux was hidden in the vaults of Bellatrix Lestrange. It sat for years beneath the streets of London, in the deepest vaults of Gringotts, protected by dragons and duplicating spells, but not protected from being what it was, a fragment of a murderer's soul. The goblins had no idea what they were protecting. They saw it as treasure, not threat, and that ignorance nearly allowed it to remain untouched for eternity. The Wizarding world seems to follow a reactive model rather than a proactive one. Action is taken only after someone is harmed or, worse, killed. There is no magical surveillance system to detect cursed energy spikes, no registry of heirlooms with suspicious histories, no mandatory reporting system for owners of historically dark artifacts. Even the Hogwarts Library's restricted section is laughably easy to access. With just a signed note from a professor, any student can leaf through pages that discuss human transfiguration, blood rituals, and forbidden enchantments. What is needed is not just regulation, but reverence, an acknowledgement that these items are not curiosities, but time bombs. There should be magical wards placed across the country, calibrated to detect items of a certain darkness. There should be penalties for keeping cursed objects unreported. And perhaps most importantly, there should be a culture of awareness where families, students, and shopkeepers know that darkness does not advertise itself with flashing signs. Sometimes it comes bound in leather and ink, disguised as history. In the end, it is always a question of responsibility. Dark artifacts do not wield themselves. They are used, hidden, stolen, misunderstood. And until the Wizarding world learns to track its shadows with the same diligence it tracks its broomsticks or its bloodlines, the past will continue to haunt the future. The name Voldemort may never rise again, but the items he left behind still echo with power. When Harry Potter entered the Forbidden Forest for the final time, he carried with him the Resurrection Stone. He dropped it, left it there. Somewhere in the leaves it still rests. I am about to die, he had thought. I am going to try to return to where I came from. I'll walk into the forest and I'll find peace. But he did not destroy the stone. He did not bury it. He did not tell anyone. And that is the tragedy. Even heroes, even those who understand the stakes, can be tempted to forget. Number 27, privacy violations through magical means. In the hidden alleys of the wizarding world, where laws often bend like the enchanted corridors of Hogwarts, there exists a shadow realm not defined by dark magic alone, but by something more subtle, more insidious, the quiet erosion of privacy. Wizards, unlike muggles, do not need surveillance cameras or wiretaps. They have spells, they have artifacts, and they have no law to stop them. Take, for example, the Marauder's Map. An innocent-looking piece of parchment that, when activated, reveals not only the detailed layout of Hogwarts, but the real-time positions of every soul within its walls. It was created by 4 mischievous students, James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, as a tool for harmless mischief. But the implications run deeper. Harry used it in his 3rd year to monitor the movement of teachers and students alike. At one point he even saw Bartemius Crouch, a man thought to be in hiding, roaming the castle. The map saw through Polyjuice Potion, invisibility cloaks, and even the animagus form. Such power, unchecked, could easily be used for sinister ends. What if it had fallen into the hands of Dolores Umbridge or Bellatrix Lestrange? Even within Hogwarts, the illusion of safety is just that, an illusion. Dumbledore, wise and kind as he was, owned a pensieve, a basin used to explore memories. While the pensieve itself requires a willing contribution of memory, it raises uncomfortable questions. How easily could a skilled legilimens like Snape bypass such consent? Snape even used occlumency to shield his own mind. But when he trained Harry in these arts, he demonstrated that a determined and experienced wizard could force his way into another's thoughts. The mind is not a book, to be opened at will and examined at leisure, Snape told Harry, and yet that is exactly what legilimency allows. And then there is Rita Skeeter, a woman whose very profession depended on violation. As a beetle animagus, unregistered and undetected, she eavesdropped on countless private conversations. She listened to Hagrid's heartache, Dumbledore's secrets, and even Hermione's personal struggles. Her article on Hermione in Witch Weekly, Harry Potter's Secret Heartache, was a product of outright spying. "She's an unregistered animagus," Hermione revealed. "And I caught her on the windowsill in the hospital wing. She's been buzzing around for stories." Rita was not punished, not officially. She was blackmailed into silence by a 14-year-old girl. The Ministry of Magic remained oblivious or indifferent. The mirror of two-way communication is another artifact often overlooked. Introduced briefly when Sirius gives Harry a fragment of it as a way to contact him, the mirror allows private, untraceable communication between two parties, regardless of where they are. While Sirius used it out of love and concern, what if such an object had been replicated and abused? The mirror bypasses all wards, all protective spells, all boundaries. There is no trace, no record, no oversight. Magical means of surveillance are disturbingly easy to access. Extendable ears, for example, were invented by Fred and George Weasley and sold openly at Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. They allowed users to listen to conversations behind closed doors, around corners, even in supposedly secure locations. Their use was portrayed humorously, but imagine them in the hands of someone less scrupulous than a pair of pranksters. The Order of the Phoenix used them to spy on the Ministry. So did students at Hogwarts. No parental consent was needed. No laws existed to restrict their usage. There is a curious absence of legislation in the wizarding world regarding magical surveillance. The Ministry of Magic regulates apparition, time-turners, and certain dark arts, but there are no known laws protecting personal privacy. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the Ministry had no qualms about using Dementors on a minor, secretly and without trial. If such acts are permissible, what then of smaller infractions, like using a magic mirror to watch someone from afar? The case of the enchanted photograph is another troubling element. Wizarding photographs move, yes, but they also seem to retain fragments of personality. Sirius Black smiled and waved in the newspaper, even when he was wanted for murder. Colin Creevy's snapshots of Harry captured more than images, they captured presence. Is it possible that photographs could record conversations, or worse, be used as magical channels for spying? Magical portraits are even more unsettling. They think, they speak, they travel between frames. Phineas Nigellus Black, a former headmaster of Hogwarts, routinely travelled between his portrait in Dumbledore's office and another in 12 Grimmauld Place, delivering information. He could listen, observe, and report. Nobody asked the inhabitants of the house for consent. The portrait was always watching. Imagine a world where every room, every public space, every hallway bore such a frame. The wizarding version of Big Brother would be silent, omnipresent, and disturbingly polite. The use of owls, the primary communication system in the wizarding world, is another vulnerability. Owls can be intercepted, letters opened. Dobby, a house elf, once stopped mail delivery to Harry for an entire summer, no encryption, no safeguards. And when Harry received threatening letters, like the howler from Molly Weasley, no one questioned the legality of magically screaming at a minor through the post. House elves themselves raise further concerns. Bound to serve wizards and compelled to obey, they can become unwilling agents of surveillance. Creature, the Black family's elf, betrayed Sirius's secrets to Narcissa and Bellatrix. Dobby revealed critical information when asked indirectly. They hear everything, they see everything, and they are not protected by any code of confidentiality. Magical objects imbued with memory, it's like Tom Riddle's diary, show how dangerous memory itself can be. The diary allowed the preserved essence of a 16-year-old Voldemort to manipulate and control a living student. He learned Ginny's fears, her secrets, her soul. He twisted her through knowledge. This was not surveillance in the traditional sense, but it was a form of psychological penetration that left no trace and no legal remedy. Even the use of time-turners can be construed as a threat to privacy. With a single spin, one could observe a conversation from the shadows, witness private moments, or eavesdrop on critical decisions. The Ministry destroyed all time-turners after the battle in the Department of Mysteries, or so they claimed. But if even one survived, the potential for abuse is immeasurable. No one would even know they were being watched. In the broader context, the magical world's ignorance or indifference to privacy may stem from its culture. Secrets are currency, knowledge is power. The Order of the Phoenix operated in shadows, using code names and enchantments because they knew the enemy listened, but the Ministry did too. They employed magical surveillance during the Second Wizarding War to track Muggle-borns and political dissidents. It is the view of the Ministry, read a decree, that those of Muggle parentage are stealing magic. Behind this rhetoric was an entire apparatus of magical monitoring. Children are not exempt. The Trace, a magical enchantment placed on all underage witches and wizards, monitors spell use. While it only detects magic in the vicinity of the child, it raises questions. Who watches? How is the data stored? What if a child lives in an abusive magical household? Would the Trace know? Would it care? Fidelius charms, designed to conceal secrets within a single soul, seem like a solution, but they require absolute trust. In the case of the Potters, their secret keeper, Peter Pettigrew, betrayed them. The magic was perfect. The human element was not. The tragedy revealed how fragile magical privacy truly is when manipulated by loyalty and deception. In the end, it's not the artifacts or spells that pose the greatest threat. It's the lack of boundaries. The wizarding world does not have a Department of Magical Privacy. There is no law that prevents Rita Skeeter from turning into a beetle and scuttling under doors. No law that forbids Fred and George from selling spying tools to children. No law to punish a student who maps the footsteps of every living being in a castle. What happens when such tools fall into the hands of someone like Lucius Malfoy, rich, powerful, and unbound by conscience? Or into the hands of someone like Dolores Umbridge, who delighted in controlling others and punished dissent? With the right spell, Umbridge monitored student correspondence, censored newspapers, and tortured children with enchanted quills. "I must not tell lies," etched itself into Harry's hand, a permanent scar. The lack of outrage in the magical community is perhaps the most chilling detail of all. Privacy is not a right, it is a privilege, granted only when those in power deem it appropriate. Even Hermione Granger, usually a champion of rights and ethics, kept Rita Skeeter locked in a jar for weeks, silenced and helpless. No one came to her aid, no one questioned it. In the magical world, the lines between justice and revenge are as blurry as the ink in a quick quotes quill. Without laws, without limits, magic becomes a tool of surveillance and control, as much as it is a source of wonder. The same charm that can illuminate a room can also uncover secrets. The same potion that reveals truth can extract confession, and the same spell that hides can destroy. The Marauder's map, Rita's beetle form, enchanted portraits, extendable ears. All of these serve as warnings. Invisibility in the magical world is not limited to cloaks. It cloaks the abuse of power, the ignorance of law, the absence of consent, and it leaves everyone, even the boy who lived, exposed.